Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Millennium, The Fall of Terok Nor by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. Read by Joe Morton.
In the hands of the prophets. There was another time, Sisko says. It is not linear, his son Jake answers. The 12-year-old boy dangles his fishing line in the quiet water of the pond, rippling the reflections of towering trees, green fields, and the pure blue sky of Earth. Uncounted summers happen all at once for the Sisko, who falters with the syntax of eternity. But it is, was, will be. His father plays the upright piano in the restaurant in New Orleans, as the Sisko first takes his captain's chair on the bridge of the starship Defiant. All within a single heartbeat. The same heartbeat. In the ready room of the Enterprise, in orbit of Bajor, Jean-Luc Picard tells him, "You're laughing again." The Sisko looks down at the old uniform he wears at this moment. The texture feels so real to him, even as it dissolves beneath his fingers and he is in his bathing suit on the beach carrying lemonade to the woman who will be, was, his wife. Still at this same moment. On Deep Space Nine, his mother Sarah stands by the viewport in his quarters, the radiance of the opening doorway to the celestial temple filtering through her hair. Wormholes within wormholes. Temples within temples. An infinite regression. Or an eternal one. The Sisko says, "I think I finally know why I'm here. Why you had to be certain my mother would marry my father, give birth to me." Major Kira stands at her station in Ops and agrees. "You are the Sisko." The Sisko says, "You need me here. You need me here to teach you." The Sisko finds himself in the light space. Around him, Sarah, Jake, Kira. The Sisko holds up a finger, and each of his observers watches it, as he knows they will. The Sisko regards their expectant faces and laughs again. "Look at you all. You want to know what I'm going to say next because you don't know." The prophets are silent. The Sisko thinks of a thing, of a time, of a moment, makes it real. They are on the promenade of Deep Space Nine, and he leads them to the entrance of the Bajoran temple and holds out his hand to them. "Welcome, prophets. Your emissary awaits you." All enter the temple then. It takes hours for them all to pass through, all in a single moment. The last is the Sisko, poised on the threshold of the temple. He remembers his own words the first time he stands here. Another time. An infinity of eternities in just 2 words. An infinity beyond the understanding of the prophets. Until now. The Sisko enters the temple. Not to show them the beginning of things, because that would be linear. He enters the temple to show them the end. As it was. As it is. As it will be. On this day, the day of withdrawal, like a beast with talons extended to claw through space itself, the station stalked Bajor one final time. The curved docking arms angled sharply downward, as if gouging the planet's surface to leave blood-red wounds of flame. And from each blazing gash of destruction, wave after wave of ships lifted from the conqueror's camps and garrisons. 60 years of butchery and brutality had at last come to an end. On this day, The Cardassians were leaving, but they had not left yet. The dark station that was Terok Nor shimmered with the fire of its own inner destruction. Departing soldiers phasered equipment too heavy to steal. Decks shook as rampaging looters forced internal doors and shattered windows. Quark, the barkeep, kicked and fought as the Cardassian soldiers dragged him from his bar.
It's my bar. I can't.
A scowling officer waited for him with a coil of cable. Quark of Terok Nor, you miserable mound of sluck scum, for the crime of rigging your dabu table, for the crime of watering your drinks, short-timing the holosuites, inflating tabs, and, most of all, for the crime of being a Ferengi, I sentence you to death. The sharp cutting pressure of the cable wrapped around Quark's neck ended any chance he had of saying a word. Two soldiers hooked the other end of the thick cable to the grappler on the cargo antigrav. The antigrav rose smoothly and slowly until the cable snapped taut against Quark's neck, yanking him at last from the grip of the soldiers who had held him. Even as his vision darkened, Quark raged at himself for having failed to predict how quickly the end of the occupation would come. He had seen the signs. Another month, he had concluded, perhaps two. Time enough to profit from the Cardassian soldiers being shipped out, eager to convert their Bajoran souvenirs to more easily transportable latinum. He saw the glow of a phaser emitter node by his chin, felt a searing flash of heat at his neck, and then the constriction of the cable was gone.
Breathe.
Quark choked as he saw who was saving him from the Cardassians. Another Cardassian? Someone Quark had never seen before. The stranger fired at two other Cardassian soldiers across the promenade at the entrance to the temple. Cardassians fighting Cardassians? It made no sense. If he could just get back to his bar. But the stranger jerked Quark to his feet. He pointed toward what was left of the jewelry shop.
That way, as fast as you can.
The stranger fired blast after blast at a group of Cardassians suddenly charging him from the other direction. Then Quark saw multiple shafts of disruptive energy blast his captor. Alone now, Quark acted on pure instinct. He sped for his latinum. Scuttling like a Ferengi banker crab, he finally reached the door of his bar.
Get down, you fool!
Quark whirled around at the guttural command.
Odo, how long have you been here? An hour since Gul Dukat left the station.
Quark felt a rush of indignation.
You were hiding here when they dragged me out of there? Why didn't you try to stop them? In your capacity, that is, as a duly appointed law enforcement official.
Odo shrugged.
52 hours ago, Terok Nor ceased to be a protectorate of the Bajoran cooperative government. Martial law was declared under the provisions of the Cardassian Uniform Code of Military Justice. And under military law, the Cardassians were within their legal rights to execute you. But they were going to hang me for the crime of being a Ferengi.
Odo shrugged again.
Even the Cardassians are allowed poetic license.
Quark snarled at the shapeshifter.
I hope someone steals your bucket.
Then, three Cardassians stepped into the bar. One of the three interlopers scanned it.
Ferengi. Constable Odo. Step into the open, hands raised.
As Quark limped heavily toward the three Cardassians, he heard Odo step out from cover behind him. The three Cardassian strangers weren't in uniforms. They were civilians. One was distinct from the others because he was bald. The light from the tricorder's small screen flashed a set of colors across the bald Cardassian's face.
This Ferengi's Quark. What setting do we need to kill the shapeshifter?
Quark stared hard at Odo beside him. Let's see how you like it, he thought peevishly. One of the other Cardassians intervened.
Wait. Constable, can you take on the appearance of a Ferengi?
Odo frowned.
If I had to.
The Cardassian then addressed the bald Cardassian with the tricorder.
We only have this one Ferengi. If we need a backup...
The Cardassian gestured harshly with his phaser.
Turbolift 5's still working.
As they stepped cautiously over the torn down and sparking security gate leading to the Bajoran half of the station, Quark looked up to see a fourth Cardassian, also in civilian clothes, crouching on the second level. For an instant, their eyes met. It was Garrick, the Cardassian tailor. Quark looked to Odo to silently inquire if the shapeshifter had seen Garrick, but Odo was still pointedly ignoring him. They descended 10 levels. Quark began to feel again the clammy touch of panic. As far as he knew, the lower core of the station was the site of the fusion reactors, the power transfer manifolds, and basic utilities. The only way out of the lower core would be back up through the turbolift shafts, or through an emergency airlock. Finally, Turbolift 5 reached its destination. The level beyond the open doors was so dark, it looked to Quark like the void of space itself. A Cardassian pushed him forward, Odo at his side. The deck plates on this lower level weren't covered by any type of carpet. He realized with a sinking feeling it was entirely possible that boundless space was really only a few centimeters below his feet. He decided he absolutely hated Terok Nor. He'd be glad to leave it. Alive, he added quickly in case the blessed Exchequer or any of his exalted tellers happened to be listening in. This long, curving corridor on this level was narrower than any others on the station, the ceiling lower. Finally, just as Quark feared he would fall to the floor in exhaustion, the Cardassian ordered them to turn right at the next intersection. They halted before 3 more Cardassians, all females. 2 were in soldiers' armor, but there was no doubt in Quark as to which female his 3 captors served. She was the one in the middle, the only one in a black civilian outfit that clung, Quark appreciatively noted, to the ridges of her spinal cords like a second skin. The female leader studied Quark, but her widely spaced dark eyes turned to Odo. "Why is that here?" The bald Cardassian's reply was instant.
"I thought we could use him as a backup. He can take on the shape of a Ferengi."
"But can he take on the brain of a Ferengi?" The bald Cardassian nodded deferentially.
"Terrell, we are running out of options. Dukat has left. The station will be under Bajoran control in hours."
Terrell frowned. "Unlikely. In 53 minutes, the station will be a debris field and a navigational hazard. Dukat activated the self-destruct." She removed a palm phaser and without a moment's pause, shot Odo. Lightly stunned, he slumped to his knees. Terrell glared at the bald Cardassian. "Atrig, that thing is a shapeshifter. It could have escaped you whenever it chose. The fact that it didn't suggests it was spying on us. Just see you keep it stunned in case we do need it." Then she turned her attention to Quark. "You will perform a service for the Cardassian Union. If you succeed, you will have time to reach an escape pod before the station self-destructs." Terrell turned her back to him and faced a blank bulkhead. Quark could tell she was operating some kind of small device, for the bulkhead began to move to one side, revealing an extension of the corridor. There was a light source, about 10 meters past the bulkhead. It appeared to be emanating from the door whose center glowed pale pink. Quark looked up nervously at Terrell. "What's in there?" "Nothing for a Ferengi to fear." Halfway to the door, he heard a sudden commotion behind him. Odo. The constable must have tried to make his escape and not been fast enough. Quark chanced glancing over his shoulder and did a relieved double take. Odo was still staggering along behind him, supported by the Cardassian in the torn blue tunic. But now the 2 armor-clad female Cardassians held a third stunned captive, Garrick. Atrig grabbed Quark's shoulder, forcing him to a stop 3 meters from the glowing door. Correction, Quark thought. The door wasn't just glowing, it was pulsating, changing from rose pink to dark red. The surface rippled outward, but Quark knew that the shimmering surface wasn't liquid. It was a solid layer protecting those on the outside from something that these 6 Cardassians didn't want to face. Or couldn't. Yet for some reason, they believed a Ferengi could. Pulsating coils of red light snaked out from the rapidly deforming surface of the door. Quark felt himself pushed forward again by the bald Cardassian.
Terrell, what in the name of all that's profitable is in there?
A lab. What you're seeing is merely a holographic illusion, a new type of holosuite technology. We will open the door. He will go inside the lab, ignoring everything you hear, everything you see. On the main console, you'll see a power unit, a type of power crystal, spindle-shaped. You can't miss it.
And you want me to bring it out?
Terrell nodded at him. Simply disconnect 2 power leads to detach it from the console, then carry the crystal out. As soon as you do, you'll be free to go. A very unconvincing smile confirmed the situation for Quark. He instantly knew that if he succeeded in retrieving the crystal from the lab, a minute later, he'd be as dead as if he were still dangling at the end of a cable on the promenade. Terrell ordered one of the Cardassians to open the door. Incredibly, the door seemed to melt to one side, and Quark squinted as the light level reached an almost painful intensity.
Yes.
Startled, Quark looked around, trying to see who had just cried out. It was Odo.
Yes. Yes. I understand.
The shapeshifter began to reach out his arms, stretching away from his captor toward the blood-red light of the lab. The Cardassian stunned Odo again, and the shapeshifter slumped. Quark looked fearfully at Terrell.
What happened?
You didn't hear them? The voices calling? You do fine. Go, Quark, now. Quark swayed before the open doorway. The light swirls fragmented, becoming writhing tendrils that seemed to reach out for him and Terrell. The bald Cardassian leaped through the air to meet the coil of light that hurled him across the corridor. His limp form crumpled to the deck. Quark ducked as 2 more tentacles of flame-red energy snapped out from the doorway. 2 more Cardassians were lifted up from the deck, wrapped in red light. The scarlet glow spread over them like a hungry wave. Then, horribly, slowly, their wildly flailing arms and legs ceased their struggle. The 2 were sucked back into the vortex of light, disappearing in an instant. Quark turned to flee, but Terrell blocked his way. Her palm phaser was aimed directly at his head.
Hurry, Quark.
Quark stared at Terrell. It was madness to do what she wanted. It was guaranteed suicide. But as much as he hated to admit it, if he didn't do as she ordered, then that fool Odo would be on his feet and stumbling forward in his place. Quark's chest swelled out as he drew in a deep breath. As the old Ferengi saying had it, better the auditor you know than the auditor you don't. Sometimes, he told himself, you just have to sign the contract you negotiated. Quark covered his head with his arms and ran straight through the doorway into the blinding red light. It was raining. The air was sweetly perfumed with the fetid rot of a swamp. Quark gasped as he saw the soft and welcoming lights of the Ferenginar capital city shining through the distance and the dark of night. He looked around, trying to figure out where the lab had gone, where Terok Nor had gone, if he had finally died.
Quark? Is that you, son? Moogie? Over here, Quark!
Quark shifted in the mud of his homeworld, and suddenly the glittering diamond was before him, held in his beloved mother's arms. She held out the glittering jewel to him.
Go ahead, Quark! Take it!
Quark reached for the orb like a child reaching for a toy. Everything was going to be perfect now.
Moogie, can I ask you a question?
And as Quark's mother began her transformation, Quark shrieked louder than any Ferengi had ever shrieked. Quark slapped his hand to his forehead, grimacing with pain.
Who designed this frinksing bed?
He swung his feet over the edge of the narrow Cardassian sleeping ledge and tried once more to sit up, this time without banging his head. Then he looked around at the stark holding cell in Deep Space Nine's security office and answered his own question.
Cardassians. Ha!
Quark had had it with Cardassians. In fact, even though the Cardassian Occupation had ended 6 long years ago, Quark had had it with this station.
Deep Space Nine, Terok Nor, Federation bureaucrats, Cardassian secret police. What's the difference, I ask you?
He stood in front of the holding cell's force field.
Computer, release the prisoner.
Quark stepped over the lip of the cell doorway and trudged to the replicator, smacked his lips, then punched in his prisoner code for a cup of millipede juice.
Bzzzt, you're dead.
It was Odo, only 1 meter behind him.
Odo, don't do that.
Odo shook his head.
Would you rather the Andorian sisters did that?
Quark waved his hands to include the entire security office.
You're supposed to be protecting me, remember?
Odo pointed to the holding cell.
In there, behind a force field, that's protective custody. Out here, you're fair game.
Quark rubbed at his temples. 20 meters away, just across the promenade, his bar was in the hands of Rom. Engineer Rom. Turned his back on everything Ferengi, work for free, use a pad to total all bills, good for nothing, Rom.
I need something to read. Rom's driving me into bankruptcy and there's no way I can sleep. Actually, the bar has seldom been busier. Rom is treating the customers fairly, so business is up. You should be happy.
Quark couldn't believe the foul language Odo was capable of using.
Fairly. I'm ruined. That's it. Protective custody is over.
Odo didn't let him finish.
It's not that simple, Quark. Please, return to your cell. Odo, you almost make it seem as if you're putting me under arrest.
Odo said nothing.
For what, Odo? Murder? How many times do I have to say it? I did not kill Dal Nortron. The Andorian sisters did it. They killed him. And they say that you killed him. Imagine that. So, you're arresting me on their word, but you're not arresting them on mine?
Odo uncrossed his arms and shook his head.
We've been over this. If I arrest Sator and Lean while they are on DS9 as representatives of the Andorian government, they will file a diplomatic protest and I will have to release them. Quark, listen, carefully. This time you are in serious trouble. 2 nights ago, Dal Nortron won a considerable amount of latinum from you. 2 hours later, Dal Nortron died. The latinum gone. Odo, think about it. How long would I stay in business if I started killing everyone who wanted my Dabu table? Are you kidding? I give the winners presents. I give them unlimited holosuite sessions, even free drinks. I do whatever I can to get them to return to the table so I can win my latinum back. I don't kill customers. Sator and Lean say you had an argument with Nortron.
Quark glared at the changeling.
I have arguments with you, and I haven't killed you. Yet. Quark, pay attention. If I hadn't put you in protective custody, the Andorian sisters would have killed you for revenge. They see justice in rather more simplistic terms than I do. Why don't you just string me up on the promenade and be...
Quark stopped speaking, suddenly overwhelmed by a powerful sense of déjà vu.
Odo, I was having a dream just before I woke up. Hit my head. They were hanging me.
Odo frowned.
Guilty conscience.
Quark started back for his cell.
When is Captain Sisko back? Tomorrow afternoon, if they don't run into any Jem'Hadar patrols.
Odo turned and marched toward his office. Quark held his hand to his throat again, trying to recapture the elusive threads of his half-forgotten dream.
Odo, wait. Can I ask you something? Those last few days on the station, when the Cardassians withdrew, the Cardassians never liked me. Why didn't they kill me? I mean, people like me are lined up and hung, strung up on the promenade.
Something went dark in Odo.
I don't know what you're talking about, Quark.
Odo turned to leave.
Where were you on the day of withdrawal, Odo? You answer that, and I'll tell you everything about Dal Nortron.
Quark saw Odo hesitate before he disappeared through the doorway to his office. And to Quark, that could mean only one thing. Odo didn't remember what had happened to him on the day of withdrawal any more than Quark did. Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax lashed out with her boot to slam Worf on the side of his head. At the same time, she swung her sword against his bat-leth to send it spinning out of his grip. Worf put one huge hand to the side of his head, looked at the pink blood on his fingers, flared his nostrils in what Jadzia, sighing, knew all too well was a sign of intense pleasure. There was nothing a Klingon liked better than a caring, loving mate who knew how to play rough. Worf leaped over a twisted railing to land 2 meters from Jadzia.
Do not attempt to delay the inevitable. Escape is impossible.
Jadzia stood her ground, raised her sword. Who said I wanted to escape? Worf took another step, eyes absolutely fixed on his quarry.
Knowing you must lose, you choose to attempt to take your enemy with you. The Huan Du, a warrior's strategy.
Jadzia slammed into him, driving him back until he fell flat on his back. In an instant, Jadzia was astride him, hands raised, fingers scooped in the strike position of a Romulan Death Mach blow to crush the larynx. Worf fought for breath.
You cannot defeat a Klingon with a pitiful Death Mach.
There's more than one way to skin a Klingon. She swiftly brought both hands down to the sides of Worf's enormous ribcage and... Say Rumtag. Say it.
Rumtag!
Jadzia rolled off her husband and stretched out on the floor beside him. Then she ran a finger along Worf's sexily rippled brow. Call Quark and book another hour.
That is not possible, Jadzia. Odo has requested all the holosuites beginning at 0700 for his investigation of the Andorian's murder.
Jadzia nodded, understanding. Once highly detailed scans had been made of crime scenes, they could be flawlessly recreated with holotechnology, and the computers could be used to call out various anomalies with great precision. Does he have any new leads? Worf blinked at his wife.
Why would he need new ones?
Worf, Quark didn't kill the Andorian. What evidence does Odo have? Worf rolled his eyes.
The Andorian businessman Dal Nortron arrived on DS9 last Sunday afternoon. Sunday evening, he won more than 100 bars of gold-pressed latinum. 2 hours after Nortron left Quark's, he was found dead, and the latinum was missing. The Andorian was found dead near the reactor cores in the lower levels. Security monitoring is limited there. Who else would know that better than Quark?
You, for one, Worf. Maybe we should suspect you. Clearly upset by her lack of wifely loyalty, Worf glowered at Jadzia.
This conversation is useless. You have already made up your mind about the Ferengi's innocence.
Worf! We don't even know if it was a murder. Worf's heavy brow wrinkled, and Jadzia could see that he knew something she didn't, and was wondering if he should tell her.
Odo showed me Dr. Bashir's preliminary autopsy report. Dal Nortron was killed by an energy discharge weapon. Odo believes such a weapon would be too primitive to show up on the station's automatic scanning system. Microwave radiation, extremely intense. It overheated every cell in his body, a weapon without honor.
Worf, why would Quark use an old-fashioned microwave weapon when he could have disintegrated Nortron with a phaser?
Phaser residue can be detected for hours after a disintegration, and perhaps Quark didn't want to put the latinum at risk.
So, stun Nortron, take the latinum, then disintegrate him.
Jadzia, Just because I believe Quark is a criminal does not mean I believe he is a smart criminal. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and morphs, this simulation will end. Thank you for choosing Quarks for your entertainment needs.
Jadzia and Worf now stood in a simple, unadorned room, its lower walls studded with the glowing green emitters of a compact holoprojector system. The holosuite door slipped open to reveal Odo and 2 security officers. Commanders, I trust I'm not interrupting, but I do require the holosuites. Jadzia walked over to the constable. Odo, Worf told me that Dal Nortran died of exposure to microwave radiation. Odo frowned. That is privileged information. Worf was conferring with me, security operations officer to science officer. A microwave weapon seems such an unlikely choice to commit a murder. I was wondering if there might be another explanation. I am open to suggestions, Commander. Well, if the body was found near the reactor levels, a fusion power surge could set up rapid oscillations in various circuits. That's all you'd need to generate an electromagnetic field that could reach microwave levels. Could traces of such a field be detected after the fact? Absolutely. Odo nodded. Very well. I'll send a forensics team down at once. Jadzia smiled sweetly and continued. Quark and Dal Nortran could have met anywhere on the station without you knowing about it. And if they could have met anywhere, why did they choose the lower levels? What's down there? You answer that question, Odo, and you'll solve the crime. They were called Tierra Nok, literally, the life flow of iron, the arteries of the machine. That was the term the Cardassians gave to the engineering access tunnels that riddled their mining station. But as soon as Starfleet had taken control, and Terok Nor became Deep Space Nine, the Tierra Nok inevitably became known as Jeffries tubes. But unlike DS9's other retrofitted Jeffries tubes, the Jeffries tube on this lower level was dark, cramped, and cut off from the station's main airflow system. Jake Sisko blinked as steady drips of sweat rolled into his eyes. He was now flat on his back at the end of this particular Tierra Nok. The much shorter Nog was crouched at Jake's feet, passing along tools as Jake requested them. Nog, shine the light here. He pried at the egress panel with just his fingers. To his relief, it came out easily. Huh, I thought that would have been stuck after all these years. Jake looked back at Nog. You sure you haven't been back here since the last time? Nog looked offended. Why would I come down here? Jake smiled insinuatingly. The room, remember? Then Jake used his feet to push himself backwards until he dropped lightly to the floor of a small stretch of corridor. Whoa! It's still not hooked up to the main power grid. Nog stuck his head through the wall panel opening and brought the palm torch up beside him. With the Dominion War, Chief O'Brien's retrofit schedule lost its priority, except, of course, when he needed to maintain critical functions. Jake's eyebrows lifted in surprise. War or no war, it was hard to believe that after almost 6 years, no one on any of the retrofitting teams had stumbled upon this 10-meter stretch of corridor that somehow had been sealed off from all the other corridors on the level. Jake glanced up at Nog. Aren't you coming down? The young Ferengi squirmed through the panel opening and dropped beside his friend. Jake, I thought you wanted to time how long it would take Higgs and Fermion to escape through the Jeffries tube. That was the original reason why Jake had talked Nog into retracing their old routes through the Jeffries tubes. He had decided to put his semi-autobiographical novel, Anslem, aside for the time being and try something more commercial. So the new crime novel he was working on, The Ferengi Connection, was going to be set on a fictional Cardassian mining station still in orbit of Bajor. For that reason, he wanted to be completely accurate about how long it would take his crime lords, Higgs and Fermion, to secretly move from one part of the station to another. Jake had decided to base the tunnels in his novel on the engineering ones he and Nog used to play in. Jake looked around. I can use this in the story. A lost section of the station. Maybe this is where Higgs has his secret headquarters. Jake, did you ever stop to think that maybe this section was sealed off for a reason? You know, we really have to tell Chief O'Brien about this. Jake patted Nog on the back. And what are we going to say when he asks us when we discovered a lost section of corridor? Let's just see if it's still here. Nog darted past him and stood in front of the lone door. It is. Now, let's go to Ops and... Jake smiled at Nog. And now, let's see if it's still working. It is working! Jake saw Nog's large ears flush. Nog, you have been coming down here, haven't you? No. Well, yes, but not often. A few times. 5, maybe 8, 10 times? When the door slipped open, he heard Nog say, Hey, that's not my program. Jake looked into what had been the most exciting discovery of their childhood on Deep Space Nine, something not recorded on any deck plan or technical drawing, a lost Cardassian holosuite. Nog was already inside the room, standing on a slightly inclined rocky landscape. Beyond him, about a holographic kilometer away, Jake spied a collection of small stone buildings reminiscent of a primitive village. He stepped inside to join Nog, then turned around to an astounding holographic vista of a night sky. A planet filled almost a tenth of the sky. Hey, that's Bajor. Nog looked around the holographic landscape again. So, this must be one of Bajor's moons. But I didn't program this. The two friends looked at each other and reached the same conclusion. Someone else has been down here. Jake shook his head. Pretty dull program. I don't see a single Vulcan love slave. They stood in silence for a few moments, listening to the holographic wind. Jake looked back at the village and saw flickering lights in some of the windows of the small buildings. Nog looked at Jake. Does it feel as if something should be happening? Jake shrugged. It's not on pause. We've got wind moving lights in that village. But Jake, why would anyone want a hollow simulation of nothing happening on a Bajoran moon? Maybe the program's caught in a loop, or the holosuite's broken. He cleared his throat. Room, this is Jake Sisko. Show me my fishing hole. Unlike any other type of holographic simulation Jake had ever seen, the distinctive program switchover of the Cardassian holosuite now began. At first, the colors and the shapes of the Bajoran moon's landscape seemed to liquefy and swim into each other, and then, as if the plug had been pulled on reality, all the colors spun swiftly, dizzyingly, into a spiral vortex that made Jake feel as if he were about to be drawn down an endless tunnel. But just as quickly as the vertigo of that transformation made itself felt, the spiraling stopped, and with a strange optical bounce that Jake could almost feel, the new program took shape. Jake and Nog were standing on a covered wooden bridge that spanned Jake's favorite fishing hole. It was his father's favorite, too, and 6 years ago, Jake had been delighted to discover that this secret Cardassian holosuite could access his father's programs from DS9's main computers. Except, Jake turned to Nog. This isn't my program either. The perpetual summer sun wasn't shining. In fact, the day was overcast. In fact, it was actually raining. Nog confessed with a shrug. I, sort of made some, minor modifications. The rain makes me feel more at home. Then Jake saw that he and Nog weren't alone. There were people swimming in the fishing hole. Nog, who are they? He stepped closer to the bridge's railing, saw the impressive size and bulbous shape of the swimmers' bald heads. Ferengi? The Ferengi swimmers saw Jake and Nog on the bridge and started waving enthusiastically. Then Jake saw how small their ears were, and he began to really understand. Ferengi females. Two of the swimmers began climbing a wooden ladder at the side of the bridge. and as they stepped onto the bridge, leaving wet footprints behind, Jake was momentarily startled by the bulky, multi-layered swimming costumes the Ferengi females wore. Other than their heads, their hands, and their feet, not a square centimeter of skin was exposed. Not a curve of their bodies could be discerned. Jake looked at Nog with a grin. Nog's open-mouthed smile was so broad it almost made him look as if he'd just been stunned by a phaser. The Ferengi teenager stared at the two fully clad females without blinking. Jake teased him. "Nog, you're drooling." Nog looked up at his friend. "Vulcan love slaves don't wear any clothes. Where's the fun in that?" Jake took Nog by the arm, tugged him toward the door to the corridor. "Nog, you need to get out more. Let's go find Chief O'Brien." Allowing Nog to wave a sad farewell to the Ferengi females, Jake pushed his glum friend out the door. If Miles O'Brien had his way, every starship, every shuttlecraft, and every space station in the galaxy would be as smooth and featureless as his little son's bottom. Not that DS9's chief engineer minded a turn in space. Perhaps because he was a happily married parent of two young, active children, O'Brien greatly enjoyed putting on an environmental suit and slipping out of the artificial gravity fields for an hour or two, just as he was doing today to float above the Defiant, relatively speaking, of course. In stolen moments such as these, when he could just drift peacefully among the stars, hearing only the rhythms of his own heart, his own breathing, he found those moments truly restoring. But to work in space, in the 24th century, what was Starfleet thinking? To O'Brien, the perfect spacecraft would have everything accessible from within, so that engineers and repair technicians could work safely in a breathable atmosphere. The brisk voice of Major Kira sounded in O'Brien's helmet communicator.
"You still breathing out there, Chief?" "Sorry, Major. I was concentrating on the transionic power coupling. There's not a lot I can do while the computer's working. Which is why, Chief, I was wondering if you'd like to lend a hand to the power transfer conduit work crew. They were almost ready to lift off a hull plate, but then they got an anomalous density reading."
Kira's news hit O'Brien like a shock of transstater current.
"Tell them not to touch it. I'm confident they know enough not to do that. Rom's leading the team."
O'Brien's sudden concern subsided to a more tolerable level of wariness. Rom was one of the best junior technicians he had ever trained. As O'Brien's line of sight cleared the interior habitat ring, he could see the red glow of the fusion reactor's exhaust cone at the relative bottom of the station. There, the saucer-shaped module containing the station's main fusion reactors was attached to the main core. The end product of the fusion reactor, power, was delivered to the rest of the station through 6 exterior power transfer conduits. Yesterday, when Odo's murder investigation team had detected an inexplicable modulation in the output of power transfer conduit B, O'Brien had called for a by-the-book shutdown. Once the conduit was cold, he had assigned an engineering team to open it up and remove all the exterior hull plates so that they could conduct a visual inspection in addition to the molecular scanning. He found he was actually looking forward to helping Rom and his team. There were 3 other engineers with Rom, floating by the top of the power conduit where it entered the lower hull of the main station. Rom was easy to identify. He wore a modified helmet that provided more room for his Ferengi skull. Rom called in greeting.
"Chief O'Brien, I didn't mean for Major Kira to call you away from your important work." "That's all right, Rom. What do we have?"
On Rom's forearm pad, they watched a holographic display of a hull plate scan. O'Brien noted with a frown that several segments of the hull plate's interior layers were mixed together as if sections of them had melted into each other.
"All right, Rom. What possibilities should we investigate?"
Rom gathered his thoughts.
We might conclude the mixing of layers is a manufacturing flaw Or perhaps a power conduit rupture.
O'Brien agreed.
Exactly. So what procedures do we follow to identify the actual cause?
Rom recited the steps to be taken next, to the final step of setting up a portable force field in order to keep any possible debris contained once the damaged hull plate had been removed. Rom and the other engineers proceeded, and as the hull plate seal was broken and the plate began to drift away, Jadzia stood by in ops to grab the plate with a construction tractor beam. As far as O'Brien was concerned, a ruptured energy conduit would certainly explain the anomalous readings Odo's people got from the lower levels when they were investigating the death of the Andorian businessman. When Rom screamed, O'Brien swiftly thrust it in to see whatever it was that had so upset the Ferengi. Dead bodies. 2 of them. Cardassians. Crammed into the insulating buffer zone between the power transfer conduit's inner and outer hulls. Their jaws were agape in terror. Desiccated gray flesh still coated what could be seen of the 2 skeletons.
It's all right, Rom. Calm down. O'Brien to ops. There are 2 bodies in the insulating space between the hulls. Cardassians.
Jadzia's voice came over the comm link.
Chief, we should transport the bodies to the infirmary for Julia.
O'Brien looked back at Rom.
Give me a hand pulling them out so Jadzia can transport them. And be gentle. They're apt to be a bit brittle.
O'Brien took hold of one of the corpse's arms. He couldn't see where the dead Cardassian's legs were. He abruptly tumbled away from the conduit, pulling the upper half of the dead Cardassian with him. The truncated body spun around in empty space, and the fate of the lower half was now apparent. The lower half of the Cardassian's body had been fused within the metal hull plate of the station. O'Brien thought that the poor devil must have been caught in the worst kind of transporter malfunction imaginable. Almost an impossibility, as 15 separate fail-safe systems made certain that such a tragedy could never happen by accident, which meant only one thing to O'Brien. Odo had 2 more murders to investigate. Captain Benjamin Sisko had returned from the Defiant's latest patrol to find that Starfleet had unexpectedly assigned him a new second-in-command to coordinate with Major Kira. Kira's reaction had been explosive. She believed Starfleet was passing judgment on her performance, or the perceived lack of it. Fortunately, Sisko had been able to quickly confirm that Commander Arla was here only on temporary assignment. At the moment, Sisko was forcing himself to listen to every word Arla Reese had to say about the time and motion modification studies that had arisen from observations of Bajoran and Starfleet personnel working together. When she had finished, Sisko nodded. Commander, those are very insightful observations about working conditions on DS9, but they won't work. The dismayed young commander shook her head. Sir, but how can you know without trying? Sisko settled back in his chair with a patient smile. I have tried them, Commander. I have no doubt they are true for humans and Bajorans. But look out there. What about Commander Worf? Commander Dax? Should we force Martians to celebrate the Bajoran Days of Atonement instead of Colonial Independence Day? Arla's almond-brown eyes met his. Well, actually, sir, one of my suggestions is that all group religious celebrations be banned from the station. Religious events really have no place in what is, at least for now, primarily a military environment, which is what DS9 will be for the duration of the Dominion War. Sisko concentrated on keeping his voice calm. What surprises me, frankly, is that you, a Bajoran, are making this suggestion. We're not all religious fanatics. I mean, we're not all religious to the same degree, sir. With all due respect, I'd be much more inclined to believe that the Bajoran wormhole was a celestial temple if it didn't form with Verderon nodes. If it's truly a home for gods, shouldn't it operate outside the normal laws of physics? Sir, do you believe the wormhole aliens are the prophets? Sisko placed his hands together. I am sure that there are entities who live in the wormhole, I have no doubt that these entities are indeed what the Bajoran call their prophets. Arla spoke in earnest. And are they gods? In all honesty, Commander, I don't know.
Bashir to Cisco. I've completed my preliminary scan of the two bodies Chief O'Brien found, and I'd say we're looking at two more murders. Both were killed by the same type of weapon that killed the Andorian.
Cisco's jaw tightened. I see. Does Quark have a connection to the Cardassians?
I've asked Odo to bring him over to the infirmary. I think you should be here.
On my way, Doctor. Quark glanced furtively around the infirmary to avoid Captain Cisco's gaze, but everyone else was looking at him too. Everyone except the two very dead Cardassians on the examination table. What was left of them. Quark turned away.
Can't you cover them up or something? It's disgusting.
Dr. Julian Bashir looked up from his continuing inspection of the corpses. After being blasted with microwaves, transporter fused to hull metal, and exposed to vacuum for a few years, these two are so mummified that one of them could be Garrick and you wouldn't be able to recognize him. Garrick, the Cardassian tailor, gave a polite cough from his position overlooking Bashir's shoulder. One hastens to add, Doctor, that a simple process of elimination should serve to confirm that I am not one of the dear departed. Quark interrupted.
Excuse me, but can we get back to me for a minute?
Odo replied gruffly.
That depends. Are you ready to make a confession?
Quark bared his artfully stained fangs.
You people, you take the spore pie, all of you. 2 nights ago, an unexplained death. And what do? You play Let's Blame the Ferengi. And now, 2 more unexplained deaths from 10 years ago. And what do? I'm sick of being your one-size-fits-all answer to crime on DS9.
There was only silence in the infirmary. Quark straightened his jacket, wondering if it just might be possible that he had finally managed to get through to these small-lobed aliens. Then Cisco ruined it all. Quark, why 10 years? How do you know when these 2 Cardassians were killed? Quark's ridged brow crinkled in puzzlement.
Isn't that what Dr. Bashir said? That they were killed during the occupation? That was 10 years ago.
Kira spoke up. Technically, the occupation spans anywhere from 6 to 66 years ago. Quark sputtered.
All right, I confess, I took a number out of thin air.
Bashir then spoke. Calm down, Quark. The only reason I've called everyone in here is to see if we can't get some answers. He turned to Garrick, who was still hovering behind the examination table. May I call upon your expertise? Garrick regarded the doctor warily. Oh, Doctor, I'm afraid that in matters of mysterious deaths, I am entirely bereft of experience. Bashir clarified. I was speaking of your expertise as a tailor. Garrick nodded graciously. But of course, you'd like me to examine the clothes these 2 are wearing. Without further hesitation, Garrick bent over the table. Ah, Doctor, here's your first clue, and one doesn't have to be a tailor to see it. This one's hair, very characteristic. This man was a soldier in the Invidian battalion. They managed the southern provinces. Kira bristled. They were a death squad. Cisco put a hand on Kira's shoulder. Then, Garrick, why is he in civilian clothes? Quark shook his head.
Humans, always changing the subject.
Garrick lightly directed his answer to Kira. Perhaps he died on his day off. I'm sure his DNA profile will be on file at Central Records. Bashir asked the Cardassian. Can you at least make a guess as to where the clothes were made? Garrick manipulated a pair of medical tongs to open up the tunic. He froze. The lining... I often used this fabric myself. Look at the exquisite workmanship of that cross-stitching. Oh my. This is one of mine. Unfortunately, though, it appears I have forgotten the customer. In fact, I have no recollection of even making this tunic. Odo looked thoughtfully at Garrick.
Is it possible that you made or sold this tunic about the time of the withdrawal?
It's possible. Quark had no intention of standing idly by while Odo proceeded with his typically time-consuming investigation. It was as if the changeling had never heard of the 9th rule and the value of acting on raw instinct.
Garrick, tell me, can you remember anything that happened on the day of withdrawal?
Of course. Every detail. Quark shot a sideways glance at Odo. The changeling was frowning, but Quark knew it was for the same reason that he himself smiled. Garrick was lying, and Quark and Odo knew it. Then Garrick turned and left the infirmary without another word. Quark grinned at Odo.
See? The same thing happened to him.
Sisko shook his head. Am I the only one who's missing the point of this conversation? Quark explained.
Captain, neither Odo nor I can recall anything about what happened to us on the day of withdrawal. And I think it's obvious that Garrick doesn't remember anything either.
Sisko rubbed at his goatee. Quark, why am I feeling that you're changing the subject now?
It's the same subject, Captain. 2 Cardassians dead from 6 years ago. An Andorian dead today. Dr. Bashir says everyone was killed by the same type of microwave energy discharge. Now what you have to do is find someone with a link to all 3 victims. Does anyone else find it suspicious that Odo was going out of his way to blame these murders on me?
Odo shook with anger.
Quark, I'm warning you.
To Quark's relief, Sisko intervened. That's enough, Constable. This is an open investigation. Sisko looked at the doctor. I want you to prepare complete DNA profiles for these 2 bodies so we can identify them through Cardassian Central Records. Bashir nodded. I'll prepare the records, but aren't we at war with the Cardassians? For humanitarian purposes, Doctor, Starfleet and the Cardassian Union have established unofficial lines of communication to facilitate the identification of war dead and the repatriation of remains. You give me the profiles, I'll handle the rest. Then Sisko faced Odo. As for you, Constable, I want a complete report on Dal Notran's death on my desk within the hour. And Quark, here's my offer to you. Cooperate with Odo in the investigation of Dal Notran's death. Answer all the questions he asks, and instead of being confined to your cell, you'll be under station arrest with a bodyguard. Then Sisko and Major Kira left the infirmary. Odo gestured sarcastically toward the door.
Come along, Quark. You're with me.
But it appeared Dr. Bashir wasn't quite finished with either of them. Just a minute, you two. Is it true what you both said about not being able to remember what happened on the day of withdrawal? Quark nodded emphatically.
A complete blank. I remember starting to pack up the breakables in the bar when the first reports of the troop transport launches started coming through. And then, next thing I knew, Rom and Nog found me asleep in the storage room, and it was the next day.
Bashir looked at Odo. How about you, Constable?
Nothing so mysterious. I've been thinking more about it, and I do remember breaking up a fight outside the chemist's shop. I was obviously hit by phaser fire and woke up a day later when the Bajoran provisionals arrived.
You're sure that's what happened? I mean, someone saw you get shot, or you confirm there was a fight at the chemist's?
Odo nodded.
Now that you mention it, yes, I do recall looking into it over the next few days. When the fighting broke out, I went to the promenade. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up and the whole thing was over. The withdrawal, Gul Dukat's departure, I missed it all.
With that, Odo escorted Quark from the infirmary, and they both made their way along the promenade to the security office. When Quark saw the crowds in his bar, his eyes widened in alarm. He started toward the entrance, but Odo grabbed him by the ear.
After you've cooperated, Quark.
Quark continued without protest. because in just those few seconds he had had to look in through the main entrance to his bar, he had seen 3 people whom he did not want to notice him. 2 of the people were those Andorian sisters, together at a small table and leaning so close together in intent conversation that their blue antennae almost touched. But the 3rd person, sitting at the bar, was far more important to avoid than either of the Andorians. She was Vash, a human female who had traveled the galaxy not only with Jean-Luc Picard of the Enterprise, but with the unfathomable entity known only as Q. She was also Quark's favorite archaeologist, the one potential business partner he constantly thought of with real regret as the one who got away. And if Vash had returned to Deep Space Nine ahead of schedule, then Quark had no doubt that the news of Dal Nortran's untimely end had already spread across the quadrant, and all of Quark's other special customers were already on their way. Unfortunately, for that exact same reason, Dal Nortran's death, Quark had been left with nothing to sell. Which meant that over the next few days, the Andorian sisters were not the only ones on Deep Space Nine who'd be looking to kill a certain Ferengi barkeep. When Sisko had returned to the operations center, he asked Kira into his office. Major, those 2 dead Cardassians represent a mystery, and I will not have mysteries on my station. Until we find out how those Cardassians died, and why Quark and perhaps 2 other people on this station had their memories interfered with, I can't be certain if any of it might happen again. And believe me, if an attack wing of Jem'Hadar fighters is bearing down at us, I want to know that my officers are not suddenly going to develop a case of amnesia and end up fused into the hull plates. Is that clear? Sir, do you honestly believe that the constable has the wrong man and that the real killer is still free on the station? That's exactly what I think, Major. As Sisko stood in the doorway to his office, watching the Major head for the turbo lift, he was pleased to unexpectedly see his son Jake just emerging from the lift on the main deck below. His sudden smile was undercut as he saw who stepped out of the lift behind Jake, Jake's best friend Nog and Chief O'Brien. Jake looked up to wave at him as the 3 took the stairs to the upper level. Sisko frowned, and the 3 visitors froze where they stood. You know, if this were 6 years ago when I saw you 3 coming up here like this, I'd think Chief O'Brien had caught you boys playing in the Jeffries tubes again. But you 2 young men are too old for that now, aren't you? O'Brien was wheezing slightly from climbing the stairs. Funny you should say that, sir. Sisko sighed. Should we step inside? He suspected he wasn't going to like what they had to tell him. He was right. Jake, Sisko, and Nog had finally done what they should have done years ago and told DS9's chief engineer about the hidden section of the station. Then, with an agitated O'Brien at their side, they had told Jake's father, and then the strongly disapproving Lieutenant Commander Worf. For the second time in 2 days, Jake and Nog crawled through the Jeffries tube and dropped into the dark section of the corridor. A few seconds later, 3 sparkling columns of quantum mist resolved into Jake's father, O'Brien, and Worf. Sisko leveled his gaze at Jake. All right then, where's this hidden holosuite? Nog hurried ahead. Right down here, Captain. The team followed Nog until they were gathered together by the closed door. O'Brien made an adjustment on his tricorder. I'm not even picking up any evidence of holo equipment, either projectors or micro-force field emitters. Sisko looked at his son. You're certain it was a holosuite? Dad, it could run our fishing hole program perfectly. Water and everything. Sisko nodded at Worf, and Worf tapped the door control. The light from the palm torches stabbed into the room and revealed only a room. Jake turned to his father. I've never seen that before. Worf reached the middle of the room, then turned slowly.
It appears to be a lab of some sort.
O'Brien stepped in next. Circuit test bed, communications console, a few storage lockers. Jake was perplexed. But Dad, this was a holosuite. We played in my fishing hole, and Nog had a really great Ferenginar adventure playground. Nog suddenly added, "Oh, there was the moon! The Bajoran moon!" Sisko asked sharply, "Which moon?" Jake stared beseechingly at Nog, who shrugged. "I don't know. One of the inhabited ones." Sisko rubbed his free hand over his clean-shaven scalp. It was a gesture Jake had seen his father make 1,000 times, most often when Dax was forcing him into checkmate in three-dimensional chess. O'Brien walked over to an unidentified console. It was definitely Cardassian in design. Even to Jake's untrained eye, it seemed obvious that whatever had been connected to the console on the shelf had been ripped out. 2 power leads dangled to either side. O'Brien pointed his tricorder at the console's inset shelf. It was radiating, something I haven't seen before. Couldn't hurt to have Dax take a look. I think it's reasonable to assume that this was a top-secret Cardassian research facility. But why was the work being carried out here? In an occupied sector subject to attack by Bajoran resistance fighters? Sisko shook his head. I don't know, Chief. But one thing's for sure. Even after 6 years, this whole place still has a few surprises left in it. The only thing worse than a Ferengi with a headache was a Ferengi with an earache. And at this moment, in his darkened bar in the middle of DS9's night, Quark suffered from both. Unquestionably, the aftermath of the past 8 hours he had spent with Odo. He gazed up at the vivid orange, red, and yellow stained glass mural of the Tholian admiral that dominated the first floor of his bar. Why do I even bother? What about you, Admiral? Do you have an answer? The mural kept its silence, which was no great surprise. For years, that same wall had been dominated by a large Cardassian galler, courtesy of Gul Dukat. Gul Dukat had swaggered in one day to announce he had just won a spectacular work of rare and valuable art in a late-night game of Tango. And since Quark's was the only public facility on the station with a ceiling high enough to properly display this great treasure, Dukat proclaimed Quark's would be its new home. It was always in Quark's mind that if the day ever came that the Cardassians left Terok Nor, he would celebrate that glorious occasion by shattering Gul Dukat's mural into 10,000 shards. But that day had come and gone 6 long years ago. Quark poured himself a snoggin of Romulan ale. To you, Admiral, because you're still here and I'm still here, like some twisted reminder of the 117th rule. You can't free a fish from water. Actually, brother, that's the 217th rule. A lot of people make that mistake. Quark looked up to the second floor. Rom, what are you doing up there? Rom started down the stairs. Cleaning up, brother. Quark set up a second glass. Come on, have a drink to celebrate my release. Rom watched carefully as Quark poured more ale. But wasn't it supposed to be a good idea that you were in protective custody? Quark handed the glass to his brother. It was, until Odo decided I really was guilty and made it a real arrest. But Captain Sisko listened to reason. He made Odo release me and give me a bodyguard. What bodyguard, brother? Quark pointed out to the promenade. But the Bajoran security officer he had left standing watch at the main door to the bar was gone. Quark crouched down and waved his hand at Rom. Go to security. Get Odo. I don't care if you have to pour him out of his pail. Brother, I don't think he lives in a pail anymore. Quark sank deeper behind the bar, knowing there was nowhere to run. He heard Rom asking softly near the door if someone was there. Just maybe whoever was at the door, who had come to kill him, would think Rom was Quark, kill Rom, then leave. My poor brother, how brave he is to risk his life for me. He began to plan Rom's memorial party. Ah! Quark grimaced as he heard his brother's death cry. Then he heard footsteps. Vash, Quark thought, outraged. That human female had killed Rom out of spite. Then Quark heard a second set of footsteps. It was the Andorian sisters. In his mind, he painstakingly choreographed the moves he would have to make to go on the offensive. Then, in a brilliant burst of speed and grace, Quark thrust himself to his feet, spun around like a dancer, swung the bottle of Romulan ale against the edge of the bar, and... Rom? Sorry, brother, but there was nothing I could do. He made me open the door. Despite Rom's babbling, there was no one else present. Who made you open the door? Rom looked down at something on his side of the bar. He did. He said you wanted to see him. Quark leaned forward, looked over the edge of the bar, and multicolored stars exploded in his vision. No matter how bad things look, they can always get worse. Sometimes, Sisko felt that he had never left the wormhole after his first meeting with the aliens. That after his first encounter with the prophets in their celestial temple, everything that had happened since, or that appeared to have happened, was somehow already a memory he was merely reliving. Standing before the sink in the tiny kitchen alcove of his quarters on Deep Space Nine, Sisko whisked at the eggs in their copper bowl, smearing out the streaks of dark pepper sauce, frothing the egg mixture into a whirlpool just as the wormhole frothed the quantum foam of normal space-time. How many times had he done this? Made an omelet? How many times had he made this omelet? Or could it be they were all part of the exact same moment in time, and... As the door to his quarters slid open, Sisko saw Jadzia. "Sorry, Benjamin, but Quark's gone." Sisko's sense of disbelief changed quickly to dismay, betrayal. "He's left the station? I can't be sure, but, well, maybe you should come down to the bar and see for yourself. I think the situation's more complicated than we first thought. This is going to be a Starfleet matter." Sisko had been afraid of that. Somehow, when Quark was involved, situations always became more complicated. Quark's bar looked normal for this early in the morning. The Dabu table was silent, and faithful Morton was on his stool. Jadzia gestured to the bar. "Let me buy you a Raktajino." "When did you find out Quark was gone?" "Odo told me he finished questioning Quark early this morning, so I went to Quark's quarters at 9, and he wasn't there. Isn't anywhere." A sudden, worrisome thought struck Sisko. He didn't run into trouble with the Andorian sisters, did he? Jadzia shook her head. "Odo has them under 26-hour surveillance." "Barkeep, we want to order." Sisko blinked with surprise as a Ferengi jumped up into view from behind the bar. A very small Ferengi.
What do you want?
Jadzia introduced them. "Benjamin, meet Base. Base, meet Captain Benjamin Sisko, commander of Deep Space Nine."
Yeah, right, whatever. You want to order?
2 Raktaginos, please." Base gargled in disgust, then whirled around and dropped below the level of the bar again. Sisko looked questioningly at Jadzia. "Rom says he's an old friend of the family, helping look after the family's interests during Quark's troubles." "Does Rom know where Quark is?" Jadzia rolled her eyes. "Here's where it gets interesting. Rom claims that he didn't know Quark had been released." "Ah, so Quark could have come here, and the only witness would have been Rom, but why do you think it might be a Starfleet matter?" "Base isn't your ordinary Ferengi, Benjamin. He's a smuggler." Sisko drummed his fingers on the bar top. "Presumably working for Quark. Is there any connection between Base and the Andorians?" "Odo's working on it, though I think he has other things on his mind." She nodded for Sisko to look down the length of the bar. Sisko did and saw Vash, the calculating archaeologist, known for her questionable ethics as much as for her beauty. Sisko followed Jadzia down to the end of the bar. Vash turned around on her bar stool. "Captain Sisko, what a pleasure!" "Vash, what can we do for you?" Vash slipped off her bar stool and companionably took Sisko's arm in hers. "Why don't we take a walk?" So Jadzia and Vash walked out of the bar with Sisko, one on each side. Once they were out onto the promenade, Sisko looked at Jadzia, and both of them stopped walking at the same moment. "How can we help you, Vash? I'm serious. We are in the middle of a war zone here, and I have no time for games. Either convince me that you are on DS9 for a legitimate reason, or you're on the next shuttle leaving for Bajor." "Captain, what an attitude!" "You want to understand my attitude, Vash? Very well. Last week, 3 Andorians came to this station. Andorians with troubled legal histories involving smuggling. Then Base shows up in Quark's bar, and now you. The last time we had so many smugglers on board at one time was, coincidentally enough, the last time you were here, when Quark was going to hold an auction of your stolen Gamma Quadrant artifacts." Sisko turned to Jadzia. "I think I see what's going on here. Quark was going to hold another auction, which means that either he came into possession of something he thought would be of interest to the likes of Vash, the Andorians, and Base, or that you have come into possession of something you want Quark to sell." Vash's studied silence told Sisko he was close. "This is your last chance. What's going on here?" Finally, Vash turned and looked directly into Sisko's eyes. She had a question of her own. "Captain, do you believe what they say about Quark? That he killed Morton?" Sisko met her sharp gaze directly. "No." "Then do exactly as I say. I'm going to walk away from you. I'm going to look angry. You're going to grab me and say that you don't believe me. Make it look good, understand?" Vash threw up her hands. "I've already told you everything I know. Now leave me alone." She spun around and started to walk away. Sisko took 2 quick steps and then took her arm. "Sisko, to security. I need a team on the promenade, now." Vash tugged back and forth between Sisko and Jadzia. Suddenly, she slapped a hand to the side of her neck and staggered, losing her balance. Startled, Sisko caught her as she began to fall. On the side of her slender neck, he saw a small bronze metal dart, no larger than a fingertip. Vash whispered urgently, "Quark, the auction." Sisko bent nearer as Vash's eyes rolled up and her eyelids fluttered. She gasped, "An orb. Jalbador." Jadzia smiled as she watched Julian Bashir hold the neural dart up to a light and examine it closely by eye. It was so typical of him, and also what made him so endearing. Here he was in DS9's infirmary, a state-of-the-art Cardassian medical facility that had been fully upgraded with the latest Starfleet innovations, surrounded by scanners and sensors that could shuffle through the dart's composition molecule by molecule, and more often than not identify the planet of origin for every mineral compound used in its manufacture. Yet Julian still had to look at the dart himself, using his own hands and his own eyes to be certain no detail had been missed. A linear induction dart, Jadzia. Centuries-old technology. Its manufacture, interesting enough, is Andorian, as is the neural toxin inside, by cupordionide. Jadzia frowned, perplexed. That's fatal to Andorians, but it's not fatal in humans. Major Kira burst into the infirmary like an avenging Pa-wraith. "Where is she?" Bashir immediately stepped in front of Kira. "Not until she's awake, Major." "Julian, she is involved in trying to sell an orb of the prophets. That is an outrage. To me, my world, to 10,000 years of Bajorans who have sought to follow the prophet's teachings. I demand to speak to her." Bashir still didn't move. "Major, you have to remember that Vash has just received a jolt of disruptive neural toxin, almost directly to her brain. Maybe what she said did make sense. Maybe it didn't. The point is, we won't know for certain until she wakes up." "Why would someone try to kill Vash with an Andorian toxin?" Odo suddenly entered the infirmary and answered the question.
to make it appear as if an Andorian is the attempted murderer. But whoever the shooter was, he positioned himself precisely where there is a gap in the scanner coverage.
Bashir turned to the constable. Odo, in case whoever attacked Vash tries to come back and finish the job, could you...
I already have 3 officers stationed outside the infirmary, Doctor, and Worf has placed transporter suppression shields around this section of the promenade. In the interests of full security, I would appreciate being in the room with Vash when she wakes up.
Kira added, so would I. What she's done, or even planned to do, is so serious, I've reported it to Kai Wynn. 3 Vedic Inquisitors are already on their way. Bashir raised his eyebrows. Doesn't anyone think we should wait for Captain Sisko? Odo stiffened.
He's involved with Chief O'Brien. He'll be expecting a report from me and from you, Doctor, when we're finished with the prisoner. That is, the patient.
Bashir shrugged. All right, then just let me check on her first. When Bashir returned from the surgery, he announced, She's awake. You can come in now, if you still want to, that is. Kira pushed straight past Jadzia into the surgery. A moment later, Odo gave Jadzia a small shrug and followed after Kira. In the surgery, Vash was sitting up in the angled examination bed. She had shadowed circles under her large, expressive eyes, and her lustrous skin was pale, but Jadzia could see no signs of trembling or weakness. You're safe for now, Vash. Vash wasn't impressed. Oh, I see. Being safe must be some new Starfleet term for being a prisoner. Jadzia smiled sweetly. You're not under arrest. Yet. Vash's answering smile was just as sweet. Why would I be under arrest? Is it against some Bajoran law to be the target of an assassin? On Bajor, even the attempt to traffic in orbs is one of the most serious crimes in their system. Vash stretched and moved her shoulders as if verifying the health of her body. I told the captain that, huh? About Quark being involved in selling the orbs? Jadzia nodded. The archaeologist bent forward, rubbed gingerly at the side of her head. On the promenade, when I got hit, I thought I was dying, you know. I remember wanting to tell someone something that might make it easier to find who killed me. My bad luck. I didn't die. Why is that, Doc? Bashir looked away from the Cardassian readouts. The dart contained an Andorian toxin. Vash suddenly laid back against the angled table. The Andorian sisters, Seder and Lean, they've been after me for a long time. Jadzia saw Odo shake his head no at the possibility, but Jadzia did not contradict Vash's supposition. Odo's working on tracking the sisters' movements, but in the meantime, Quark and the orbs. Let's talk about that. Vash sat up and ruffled her hair into place. What's the point? If I do, I go to prison. If I don't, it's just something I said when I had a shot of bicupor-dianide bubbling in my brain. I think what I meant to say to Captain Sisko is, damn, I'm sorry I'm dying before I ever got a chance to have Quark show me an orb like he promised he would the last time I was on the station. There's one in the temple on the promenade, isn't there? Yeah, I'm sure that's the one Quark said he'd show me. Did you actually think I deal in a stolen orb when I know what they mean to the Bajoran people? Jadzia tried to sound helpful. What orb was Quark going to show you at the temple? Vash swung her legs off the side of the examination table. The orb of Jalbador. Kira moved quickly to Vash's side. Jalbador? The lost red orbs of Jalbador? Yeah, that's what he said he'd show me, a red orb of Jalbador. Kira turned away from Vash, as if she had lost all interest in the archaeologist. This is more than ridiculous. I have to contact the Kai at once. The red orbs of Jalbador don't exist. They're not part of any of the legitimate teachings of our religion. I mean, at least once or twice a year, there's some unbelievable story about the lost orbs being found hidden in the ice on Mount Bahalev, or deep in the Thracian Sea in the sunken ruins of Bahala. Bashir objected. But, Major, Bahala didn't sink in the Thracian Sea. Captain Sisko found it under the Air Arbor shield. Exactly, Doctor. But until the emissary found it, Bahala had been lost for 20,000 years. That's 20,000 years of legends and lies and outright fraud. Do you know how many people on Bajor have been bilked by swindlers who claim to have an ancient map that shows the resting places of the red orbs? Bashir suddenly blurted out, "The Brooklyn Bridge." It made so little sense to Jadzia and everyone else in the surgery that they all turned to look at him. On old Earth, to buy the Brooklyn Bridge became a colloquialism for gullibility. Odo interrupted.
Excuse me, Doctor, but is this the same Brooklyn Bridge that's installed at the big amusement park on Earth's moon?
Why, yes. Taking it apart, moving it in sections, rebuilding it, it was one of the most phenomenal engineering feats of the 23rd century.
In other words, eventually, someone really did buy the Brooklyn Bridge.
Jadzia tried not to laugh as Julian's face fell. Well, yes, Odo, but the point is... Never mind. Kira turned to Odo as she was leaving. Forget everything I sent you on Orb Law. As far as I'm concerned, you can charge this woman with being a public nuisance. Odo turned back to Vash.
Tell me, what are your plans now?
Staying alive is always high on my list of things to do.
Then obviously, staying safely behind transporter-proof shields and being guarded by my officers is agreeable to you.
But that depends on what the price is.
Quark, where is he?
Frankly, Constable, I don't know. He put the word out that he had been asked to be the broker for a transaction involving the red orbs of Jalbador. And he asked me if I knew of any prospective buyers.
And did you?
Are you kidding? Half the antiquarian collectors in the Alpha Quadrant would bankrupt themselves for a chance to own a Bajoran orb. Odo continued.
And you plan to buy it for yourself, then hold your own auction for the people who could really pay.
Vash held up her hands as if surrendering. Guilty.
You know, of course, what the penalties are for trading in orbs. Not just in Bajoran law, but under the Federation's own Protection of Antiquities statutes.
Vash curled a finger at Odo, asking him to move closer. Odo, remember what the Major said. There are no red orbs of Jalbador. If someone wants to buy something he only thinks is illegal, that's not a crime. Odo rocked back and crossed his arms.
Oh, you are a piece of work. I'll keep all the security precautions in place while you're in the infirmary. But as soon as Dr. Bashir says you can be released, I want you off this station. Is that understood?
For once, Vash seemed truly serious. Yeah, I understand. And thank you. After the surgery door had slid shut and Odo had gone, Jadzia and Julian were in the main work area, without Vash. Julian, I'm surprised at you. You and Odo were falling for everything Vash said. Bashir rolled the dart in his fingers. Jadzia, everything Vash was saying in there was a lie. I knew what was going on the instant she made her mistake. What mistake? She said she had bicupor dianide bubbling in her brain, except all I said was she had been exposed to an Andorian neural toxin. Jadzia tapped her forehead with her fingers. But Julian, how could she take the chance that her accomplice would be able to shoot her at the right time, with the right toxin, without being seen? Bashir suddenly slapped his hand to the side of his neck, driving the neural dart needle into his flesh. Julian! Bashir's only response was to seem to pluck the dart from his neck and then roll it forward in his fingers so that Jadzia could see the needle had been removed. It was in his other hand. Jadzia then concluded, she's been lying from the beginning, which could mean she does know where Quark is, and the red orbs could very well be real. Which means now we go see Benjamin. O'Brien shifted uncomfortably in the center chair of the Defiant. wasn't that he had never taken command of the ship before, but he had never done so when Captain Sisko was standing at his side. Commander Arla was at the flight operations console. Beyond her, on the Defiant's main viewer, Deep Space Nine was a distant, sparkling smear of jeweled radiance against the translucent lavender plasma wisps of the notorious belt. The captain addressed O'Brien. "Relax, Chief. Worf is standing by at Ops. If anything even looks like it's about to go wrong, you can have a full crew beamed on board in less than a minute. Are the tactical sensors reconfigured?" "As best as they can be. I'd say 10 hours for the full sensor sweep, maybe another hour for the computer to finish the comparison between the Cardassian schematics and the scan results. If there are any more hidden rooms in there, we'll definitely find them." "Very good, Chief. Now, I'm wondering if while we're conducting the station scan, you can look for something else that's gone missing. Quark." "Captain, are you sure Quark's even on the station?" "That's what I'm hoping you will tell me. Do you think you can do it?" O'Brien nodded, his head already filling with a list of the adjustments he'd have to make to the sensor scan rates. "Carry on, Chief. Sisko to Worf. 1 to beam out." It was soon after, in the relative calm of the wardroom, that Captain Sisko accepted the pad that the leader of the Cardassian mission gave him. "I am Liege Terrell, and these are our credentials." The excitement of the unannounced arrival of these 3 Cardassians on a neutral cruiser had finally lessened throughout the station, but the security concerns remained. According to the pad, Liege Terrell was the widow of a minor trade diplomat from Cardassia Prime. Her technical specialist, Dr. Freyam Batan, was a physician retired from the Cardassian Home Battalions, and her associate, Atrig, of no specified job function, was a businessman who ran an import-export company among the Cardassian colony worlds. Sisko, however, didn't believe a word of the dossiers. For a diplomat's wife, Terrell was too clearly used to giving orders, not practicing diplomacy. Dr. Batan was too young to have retired from anything, and Atrig, perhaps the most striking Cardassian Sisko had ever seen, had not lost his hair nor been so badly scarred at the base of his neck and across one of his wide shoulder membranes, ferrying goods from one world to another. Atrig had been in battle. Decked out though they were with false identities, innocuous civilian outfits, and singularly hollow smiles, Sisko had no doubt he was seated across the table from 3 very active and dangerous Cardassian soldiers. Sisko placed the pad on the table as if it held nothing of interest or of value for him. "So, you are traveling under the guise of a humanitarian mission?" Terrell smiled. "Not under the guise. We are a humanitarian mission, accepted by both the Federation and the Dominion during this terrible conflict. We are merely here to repatriate the remains of the unfortunate Cardassians you discovered fused within the hull of this station. The dead were not soldiers. Their identification files are in the pad as well. You will see that they were civilian support staff for the Terok Nor mining operation, low level. Of course, they worked for the military in trying to restore order to Bajor, and if we had not brought order to these people, our closest neighbors in space after all, when we did, Bajor would be a wasteland today." Sisko clenched and unclenched his hands. "Parts of Bajor are a wasteland today because of what you and your occupation forces did to it." Terrell smiled with infuriating condescension. "And we regret that. If you could only know how it pained us whenever we had to discipline these people." Sisko could hear his heart thundering in his ears. He wanted nothing more than to end this meeting and escape from Terrell's presence. "I can only surmise that the Amber Star has made some error, and so we will not be able to release the bodies until a more detailed analysis is completed." Terrell was on her feet at once. "Captain Sisko, do not turn this into a diplomatic incident. You are making a mistake." Sisko turned his back on the Cardassians and walked to the doors. The Sagittarian cruiser is departing tomorrow at 1500 hours. You will be leaving with it. Cardassians, Sisko thought. Cardassians back on DS9. 2 murdered Cardassians from 6 years ago, perhaps from the very same day Quark, Odo, and Garrick could not remember. 1 murdered Andorian from 4 days ago, Quark missing, smugglers everywhere, counterfeit orbs, and... Where is the pattern? Sisko asked himself. He could envision all the separate pieces swirling around like tiny runabouts tossed by the negative energy flux of the wormhole. Yet he couldn't help but feel that somehow, in some way, all those pieces should fit together. If not among themselves, then around some missing final piece. Suddenly he saw Kira's compact form hurrying toward him. "What is it, Major?" "It's O'Brien, sir. He has to see you. He's found something with the scan. All he'll say is that it's something that just shouldn't be." After Sisko had transported back to the Defiant, he had gone to the bridge. On the main viewer, O'Brien was pointing to a small red dot that flashed in the lower section of the 3-dimensional wireframe schematic of Deep Space Nine. "There, Captain. That's the hidden stretch of corridor with the holosuite, the one Jake and Nog found." Sisko watched as another pulsing light joined the first on the screen, a few decks higher. "What about that one, Chief? Is that the water recycling plant?" Yes, sir. That's the one I called Major Kira about. That's the part that just shouldn't be there. According to the tactical sensor sweep I've conducted, DS9's water treatment facility no longer exists. Somehow, and don't ask me how, it's turned into a large, empty room. And that's why the red light's flashing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but if the water plant had truly disappeared, shouldn't we know about it? Oh, we'd know about it. We'd have 1,000 calls in from the habitat ring about no running water. So, someone's got to be running a sensor mask in the treatment facility. In other words, Chief, that's where Quark is. Frankly, Captain, there could be 100 Gem Hadar hiding behind that thing and we'd be the last to know about it. That was all Sisko needed to hear. "Mr. Worf, we have a probable target. Prepare transporter suppression fields and arm the anesthetine dispensers." Sisko recited the coordinates of the water treatment facility, then told Worf, "The Chief and I will beam to Ops. We'll leave from there with a full security team." Commander Arla looked up from her station. "Excuse me, you're leaving me here?" Sisko didn't glance at the Bajoran commander as he replied. "Regulations don't permit me to completely abandon a ship. All you have to do is sit. As soon as we're finished on the station, I'll have a crew beamed out." "Status, Mr. Worf?" "Anesthetine systems are online. I am now reconfiguring the interior security fields to..." Sisko hit his communicator twice to reset it, and got nothing. Even as O'Brien scrambled to the Defiant's tactical station, it took only seconds for Sisko to see that all of DS9's communications arrays were dead. The Chief didn't take his eyes off the madly flashing tactical displays. "Massive power fluctuations. I'd say we're looking at a total computer failure. There's not a single automated system operating on the station." "Chief, this is not a coincidence. Worf was just adjusting the security fields. They were waiting for us to make our move. And if the station's computer has been infected by a programming virus, the Defiant's computers might be vulnerable too." With O'Brien at his side, Sisko transformed the Defiant into little more than an inert chunk of dead mass within 2 minutes. O'Brien turned to the captain. "Now what?" "Now we're beaming directly to the water plant, or at least to the edge of that sensor mask. Commander Arla, you have the con. I suggest you sit back and enjoy the ride." Then Sisko headed at double speed for the main doors and O'Brien followed just as quickly. "Set the coordinates for beaming over, Chief. I'll get the phasers." O'Brien called out as he entered coordinates on the console. "Not rifles. None of the pipes in the water plant is shielded. Take hand phasers and don't set them for anything higher than Force 3. Otherwise, one miss and we'll all be swimming." The light faded to reveal a dark corridor, ribbed and ringed by Cardassian struts. Sisko and O'Brien had returned to Deep Space Nine. The deck was slanted by 4 or 5 degrees. O'Brien turned to Sisko. "The station's gone to emergency gravity." He looked at the closed doors to the water treatment facility. "At least we won't drown. I hope." Sisko frowned. "Sisko to Worf." No response. There was no time to waste. Sisko moved cautiously along the slanted corridor to the edge of the oversized water plant doors. He tapped the door control. An overwhelming stench of raw sewage enveloped them. O'Brien coughed. "Must have been quite a spill when the gravity generator switched over to the backups." Sisko led the way into the huge facility. It was 3 decks high, filled with a maze of pipes, metal vats, and overhead walkways. Abruptly, O'Brien pointed up to the left. "Captain, over there." Sisko saw what appeared to be a silver flower that had sprouted on the top of a 5-meter-tall vat of dull, copper-colored metal. It was perhaps a meter across, with 3 pulsing blue lights on the tip of each of its 5 gleaming petals. It was the sensor mask. It was not Cardassian technology. Neither was it Starfleet. O'Brien took aim with his phaser. Then an object flashed through the air. O'Brien grunted as something hit his arm and his phaser went flying. Sisko pulled him into the shelter of an immense pipe and examined his arm. The sleeve of O'Brien's black jumpsuit was wet with blood, where a slender gold dagger impaled the chief's forearm. Sweat mingled with tears of pain on O'Brien's cheeks. "It's going numb." Sisko knew at once the blade had to have been coated with some type of poison. The engineer's head slumped forward, eyes closed. Filled with furious purpose, Sisko leapt to his feet, edged around the pipe until he could just see the silver blossom of the sensor mask emitter against the dark edge of the vat. He swung out and fired. Then he ducked behind the pipe as a dagger clanged against it. The sensor mask was down. Sisko leaned back against the pipe, tried his communicator again. No response. Suddenly, the thick odor of sewage intensified. A gout of dark water was spraying from the top edge of the vat where the sensor mask emitter had been. His phaser blast had obviously punctured the vat wall. In a vain attempt to shield himself from the terrible smell, Sisko pulled the neck of his duty shirt up over his mouth and his nose. He had to keep going. With the emitter gone, Sisko was able to use his tricorder. There were 2 life signs 20 meters ahead. What he found wasn't surprising. Quark, in chains, hanging head down over an open collection tank filled to the brim with dark, bubbling sludge. Quark's hands were tied behind his back, and thick black wires were cruelly clipped to the edges of his prodigious ears. The only way Sisko was able to tell that the Ferengi was even alive was because the tricorder said he was. Sisko checked the reading again. One of the 2 life signs had disappeared. Pain seared Sisko's back as he was thrown forward to the slippery deck, his phaser and tricorder both tumbling away. Sisko rolled to his feet to face an Andorian female, 3 meters away, crouched in fight-ready position, the stark blue tendrils of her antennae jutting from her distinctive blue-white Vulcan short hair. In one blue hand, she held a golden dagger like the one that had injured O'Brien. His attacker was one of the 2 sisters Odo had been watching. Sisko slapped his hand down to a second phaser, ripped it from its holster strips, and fired point blank. She collapsed at his feet. Then he started for Quark, whose mouth was moving at warp 10 but saying nothing Sisko could hear. Sisko whirled around just in time to be thrown against the sludge tank as the second Andorian sister's hand stabbed at his neck. She launched herself at Sisko before he had a chance to regain his balance. A spinning high kick struck Sisko's shoulder, knocking him back against the edge of the sludge tank. Sisko summoned all his strength to fling his arm up, splashing raw sewage in her eyes. As she shrank back from him, her eyes clawed at her face. Then she threw herself at him. Instinctively, Sisko tucked and rolled toward her, forcing contact before she had anticipated. As her foot slammed into his ribs, he looked up and saw her flailing form flip over him and land in the sewage tank. Quark maniacally spun and sputtered. "Calm down, Quark. I'll get you down." Quark screamed something indecipherable. The
Ferengi was shaking and swinging back and forth on his chains, clearly panicked by something. With a sudden flash of alarm, Sisko turned about. A moment too late. A black shape enveloped him like a tidal wave sinking a ship, and the roar of the room fell away into silence as he drowned in a sea of darkness. Quark shuddered as Sisko collapsed on the filthy deck of the water plant room. He had absolutely no idea who it was who had struck Sisko down. He hung motionless in his chains. Sisko's murderer was heading toward him, toward the sludge vat above which he dangled helpless, headfirst, and beside which Sator now lay, recovering her breath after climbing out of the vat. Of the two sisters, Quark remembered thinking when he had first met them that Sator was the cute one. The chance to feel 4 female Andorian hands on his lobes at the same time had always been a little fantasy of his. But then Dal Nortran had gone and got himself killed and spoiled everything. He'd had to avoid the sisters instead of cultivating them. Before long, Odo had him in protective custody, and then had arrested him, only to let him go just in time to be waylaid by that miserable excuse for a Ferengi, Base. And all to be dragged down here to meet Sator and Lean again. Base. The name should have warned him. The little insect had come into Quark's back office and launched into his oh-so-sincere sales pitch about how he wanted to protect his investment in the orbs, how he wanted to make sure Quark stayed safe before, during, and after the auction. He told Quark he would be safe behind a sensor mask where no one could find him. And worst of all, in Quark's recollection, was that the entire deal had been negotiated in front of his own idiot brother. Base had set the whole thing up so that when Quark disappeared, Rom would dim-wittedly think that was part of the plan and would not be concerned. No one would be concerned. Quark had willingly gone along until Base brought him to the water plant room, and the 4 female Andorian hands went to work on him in a terrible travesty of his fantasy. Quark saw the black-suited figure below draw a small phaser. The figure dispatched Sator, and then Lean. Then the black figure looked at Quark, adjusted the small phaser's setting, and took careful aim. The shooter's beam was aimed at the chain that bound his feet. Quark dropped straight into the bubbling vat of... A strong hand grabbed Quark just before he hit the liquid sewage. The figure in black deposited him on the deck, right beside the motionless body of poor Captain Sisko. Quark opened his mouth and let loose with a string of invective. I don't care who the grebe you are. If you're going to shoot me like the rest of them, go ahead. Kill me and be done with it. The figure in black pulled off his breather mask. But the murderer wasn't male. He was a female. Vash. Quark, is that any way to talk to your new partner? She snapped her breather back into place, then motioned for Quark to follow her. But there was something Quark had to do first. He reached down and got a good grip on Captain Sisko's jacket to drag the unconscious human toward an open metal staircase beside the sludge vat. I don't get it, Quark. What did he ever do for you? She'd never understand, thought Quark. Yet he could feel her suspicion, and he could almost hear her thinking, how could she trust someone who went out of his way to help a Starfleet officer? Quark wearily cupped a hand to his mouth and yelled ahead to her. He owes me money! In the dimly lit kitchen at the back of his bar, Vash ordered, Stay still and keep your eyes closed. Quark did as he was told. He was suddenly engulfed in a thick foam. When his face felt free of bubbles, he risked opening one eye, then the other. He realized with delight that the dreadful stench of the raw sewage was gone. What is that foam? Vash leaned back against an inductor stove with a sigh. A cleansing agent from Troyes. Their pheromonal systems are so volatile, they need something that will break down all organic waste completely and instantly. Vash opened the door leading to the main level room of the bar. Chairs were overturned as if customers had run out of the bar in a hurry. Vash explained it. Sator and Lean slipped a programming worm into the station's computer system. Until the worm detected someone setting up security screens around the water plant, trying to contain the area, the worm was dormant.
The bad news is, once it was triggered, it reproduced so quickly it used up all available processing space. All the automatic systems locked up. The good news is there's no permanent harm done. DS9 should be up and running in about 10 minutes or so. Vash suddenly became tense. Is someone at the bar? Just Morton, sleeping like a baby. A great, big, wrinkled, prune-faced baby. Quark, wake him up and get him out of here. We have business to conduct. Quark stood defensively in front of his first, best, and most treasured customer. I'm sorry, but even I have to draw the line somewhere. If Morton wants to sleep in my bar, well then, may the divine treasurer bless him and keep him solvent for all the days of his life. If you want to discuss business, we can do it down there. What kind of business did my favorite archaeologist have in mind? Quark winced as Vash leaned over the bar and pinched one of his earlobes, painfully. Quark, I'm talking about the red orbs of Jalbador. You made it clear you were ready to deal. That's why I saved your wrinkled Ferengi butt. Ow! Vash suddenly yanked up on his earlobe. Vash! It's not that easy. I'm just the middleman. The goods are with a third party. Vash narrowed her eyes. Who? Dal Nortran, the Andorian who came here with Shader and Lean. Those heartless females were his bodyguards, and they killed him. Vash snorted. Bodyguards don't kill their clients. It tends to cut into repeat business. Quark was outraged. They sold me out to Shader and Lean. Vash dug into her carryall, slammed a spindle-shaped chunk of dark crystal on the bar, and announced, a red orb of Jalbador. Quark could scarcely draw a breath. You mean they are real? This one is, but without the other two, it's worse than useless. So time's up, Quark. I want the map. A commotion behind Vash made Quark's heart flutter like a grubworm on a toothpick. Sator hissed. You mean this one? Vash wheeled around, phaser already in her hand, and aimed behind her. But the danger was above her, not behind. Sator and Lean were on the bar's second level, and the golden dagger Lean now threw down knocked the phaser directly out of Vash's hand. Instantly, Sator flipped over the railing to land like a feline on a crouch. Lean slid halfway down the stairway railing to the main level, a golden dagger in each hand. Sator held up a slender cylinder of amber crystal. We have the map, Vash. Without it, your orb is nothing more than a sparkly rock. Let us buy it from you. Vash was breathing hard, weaponless. Without an orb, your map might as well be a Ferengi ear probe. Let me buy the map from you. Quark saw his opportunity and acted upon it immediately. Ladies, please. What better situation could there be for striking a deal? Lean's bare blue arm flexed, and a golden dagger flashed through the air to pin Quark's too large jacket, with him inside it, to the wall. Sator and Lean moved to flank Vash. Vash's eyes moved quickly from one to the other. The Ferengi is right. We can work out a deal. Sator sneered. Dal Nortran wanted to work out a deal, and then the Ferengi killed him. Quark protested. I didn't kill anyone. Vash countered Sator. If your sisters didn't kill Nortran, and the Ferengi didn't, then who did? Sator glanced sharply at her sister. We don't care who killed him. But now, we do things our way, and we want your orb. The three of them faced each other, drenched in sweat, ready to fight to the death. Quark trembled, took a calming breath. He was falling in love, and he didn't care with which one. Suddenly, Base jumped from behind the bar, waving aloft a comically puny batleth. I'll take both. Sator turned. What are you? Your worst nightmare, Blue Cheeks. Lean suddenly threw both daggers at the minute Ferengi. To Quark's utter astonishment, Base twisted his batleth in an expert blur and deflected both daggers. Vash spat at Base. You backstabbing little Hardenack. You're supposed to be working for me. Lean snarled. We paid him off so he'd work for us. Base shrugged his shoulders.
What can I tell you, halfwits? I'm pure Ferengi, in it for the profit and nothing else.
Vash got to base first, knocking him straight off the bar to the deck. Sator and Lean attacked him from behind. Quark watched in disbelief as Base swung the bat'leth wildly at Lean until he provoked her sufficiently to reach out to swat it away. At that precise moment of contact with Base's weapon, the blue Andorian flew back in a shimmering nimbus of disruptive neural energy. All Base seemed to need to do to cause havoc was make contact between the blade and any part of his opponent's body, and Ferengi plasma whip circuits did the rest. After vanquishing Sator and Vash, so they too collapsed in the throes of neural disruption, Base sprang back up onto the bar. He swaggered toward Quark. Quark tugged at his jacket where its shoulder was still fixed to the wall by Lean's dagger.
Bash? Can't we talk about this?
The little Ferengi spun his bat'leth around his wrist, then raised his weapon.
The orb is mine. The map is mine. For the first time in my life, Base wins. I don't think so, you miserable scrap of sentient being.
For a moment, Base stopped in mid-stride, and then Quark and Base both slowly turned to look at the person who had uttered those words. Morn. The hulking Lurian was on his feet. Quark's mouth dropped open in awe and respect. Not only was Morn his best customer, he was about to senselessly sacrifice his life in a tragic and doomed attempt to save him. As tiny Base raised his bat'leth for the attack, Morn swung up his huge arm and it snaked out along the bar like golden lightning until Morn's immense hand closed on the bat'leth and crushed it. As Base gargled helplessly in Morn's unforgiving grip, Quark recovered his senses.
Odo, you enjoyed that, didn't you? Seeing me almost killed. As a matter of fact, I did. Whatever else is going on around here, and I assure you I did hear everything, Dal Nortron's still dead. And if you didn't kill him, and the Andorians didn't kill him, then there's still a murderer walking free on DS9.
Quark threw up his hands.
Finding murderers is not my job. Fortunately, Quark, it happens to be mine, and in this case, I think my job has just become much simpler.
Quark saw where Odo was looking. Directly at the red orb of Jalbador. After 5 cold restarts, Dax's computer team still wasn't rid of whatever type of binaural code Sator and Lean had input into DS9's computers. The litter on the carpeted sections of the deck was a sad reminder of the hasty evacuation of all non-essential station personnel into the habitat ring. Sisko now headed for the security office to join the others assembling there. Halfway between the turbo lift and the security office, Sisko turned to see Bashir striding quickly along the corridor toward him. "Doctor, how is the chief?" Despite every other threat to the station, O'Brien was his first priority. Worf and his security team had been beamed into the water plant the moment the transporter systems had finally been manually tuned. They'd found Sisko just coming to, and O'Brien unconscious. Sisko had given the order to evacuate the wounded chief to the infirmary. Bashir's report offered more mystery. Interestingly enough, there was another Andorian toxin on the dagger that hit him. Not the same one Vash used on herself, but one intended to incapacitate almost any species. But it's not fatal. At least, not to Miles. He's too stubborn. The doctor glanced around at the unsettling state of the promenade as they walked towards Odo's office. "I suppose you've already thought about this, but what happens if the Dominion hears about our condition?" Sisko had thought about that. Admiral Ross has already dispatched the Bandar and the Garneau to provide us support. They'll stand up to anything the Dominion can throw at us. They reached the doors of the security office and stepped through. To save what was left of his hearing, Sisko issued an immediate command.
Be quiet! Everyone!
Sisko turned brusquely to Quark. "Where's the orb, and where's the map?" Quark led Sisko and Bashir to the other side of the constable's office. On a table was a spindle-cut chunk of what appeared to be randomly faceted red glass and a small amber cylinder. All the orbs of the prophets Sisko had seen resembled shimmering hourglass shapes of solid light. He picked up the faceted artifact to examine it more closely. "It doesn't look like an orb," Quark explained. "Word has it, it's only supposed to glow when it's close to the next orb. There's supposed to be 3. You use one to find the next one, then use those 2 to find the third." Sisko touched the edge of the artifact, sensed no trace of the prophets. "And how much were you going to make by allowing this travesty of the Bajoran religion to take place?"
"Captain Sisko, I swear I had no idea the orb was real. I thought I was going to be selling just the map."
Sisko held up the amber map cylinder. "Tell me about this." Quark shrugged.
"I never saw it till Dal Nortron brought it to the bar the day he arrived to arrange an auction for the map."
"What's it a map of, Quark?" Quark sighed dramatically.
"According to the Jalbador legend, the 3 red orbs were scattered so they could never be brought together. Whoever hid them made a map. Dal Nortron obtained, from whatever source, a map that apparently reveals the world on which the second red orb is hidden. You need the first orb to find the second. They react to each other, like a location beacon or something."
Sisko handed the map cylinder to Odo. "Constable, is there any way we can see what's on this?" Odo studied the transparent amber rod.
"Looks like a standard Cardassian memory rod."
He walked over to a wall display, pressed a control, and a rod holder slid out. On the display screen appeared a map, but not an entire planet. Instead, it outlined a city layout of streets and dwelling blocks. Odo studied the schematics on the display screen.
"Maybe the legend was wrong. Instead of showing a world, the map shows a place on a world."
Sisko tried a different approach. "Even if this map is a copy, and if it truly dates back to 10,000 years ago when the first orbs started to appear, the Bajorans didn't have space travel, so the orbs had to have been hidden on Bajor itself. In any case, the mystery that should concern us right now is who killed Dal Nortron." "Hey, Dad." Sisko turned, automatically smiling at the sound of his son's voice. Jake stepped cautiously into Odo's security office, hoping to find out what was going on. "Jake, you know you shouldn't be here. I want you back at our quarters." Jake nodded without protest, but just before stepping out, he glanced up at the display screen.
"Hey! You got the interface with the Cardassian holosuite going."
Everyone looked at him in surprise, including his father. Jake pointed to the display screen.
"It sure looks like the layout of the village Noggin I saw. The one on the Bajoran moon."
Just for a moment, Sisko felt Deep Space Nine wheel crazily around him. He suddenly was certain that the last piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. And the truly maddening thing was, it had been there all along. Jake studied the holographic image that surrounded him and all the other onlookers in the holosuite at Quark's. As far as he could tell, it was a close reproduction of the primitive village he and Nog had seen in the distance 4 days ago, when they had entered the Cardassian holosuite. He looked over at his father, secretly pleased to be able to make an important contribution to the investigation. His father turned to Odo. "Constable? Theories?"
I think it's obvious, Captain. Dal Nortron somehow knew about the Cardassian holosuite in the hidden section of the corridor. He used it to create a simulation of this Bajoran lunar village, no doubt attempting to narrow down the location of the second orb. The map is recorded on a Cardassian memory rod. That implies Nortron obtained it from a Cardassian source, and that it was a Cardassian who knew about what was hidden on Terok Nor and then told Nortron.
Major Kira returned from a walk through the simulated village. "This reconstruction doesn't match any village on any of the inhabited Bajoran moons. It's a fake. Captain, we're wasting our time. Cisco held up his hand. Just a minute, Major. Let's accept that this simulation doesn't match an existing lunar village. But could it match an ancient one? Lunar villages aren't that ancient, sir. The oldest ones would only be 1,000 years old. Forgive me, Major. Rather than ancient, let's say old. Could this represent an old lunar village? Kira turned around to stare back at the simulation. Well, the architecture is right, but if the red orbs are supposed to have been split up 10,000 years ago, how could one of them have been buried on a Bajoran moon 1,000 years ago? Cisco turned to his son. Jake, I wish we knew what moon this was supposed to be. Computer, add Bajor to the night sky, as seen from the Bajoran moon of Barado. Jake looked up as the purple sky suddenly rippled and turned black. A few moments later, a full Bajor appeared against the stars. Nog shook his head.
Too small. It was twice that size at least.
Cisco gave the challenge to Kira. Major, is there any moon that orbits the planet even closer? Kira shook her head. Not habitable. Cisco's smile was triumphant. You mean not habitable now? Jake didn't know what his father was talking about, but Kira apparently did. Gerardo? Gerardo was only converted to an energy source 5 years ago, not 1,000. Jake had a sudden flash of inspiration. Which means someone could have hidden the orb on Gerardo 5 years ago, to keep it out of the hands of whoever's been trying to find the orbs and bring them together. Kira turned to Cisco. That orb will never be found because it either doesn't exist, or if it does, because it's hidden on Gerardo. Either way, the map means nothing. No one offered an objection to Kira's conclusion, so neither did Jake. Cisco sighed. Computer, end program. But nothing changed. The simulation remained. Then, something unusual happened. Jake was amazed to see the distant landscape shimmer as 3 Cardassians, 1 female and 2 males, including one who was bald and badly scarred, stepped through the holographic simulation to join the group in the holosuite. Each held a Cardassian phaser. The female smiled. Thank you, Captain Cisco. You finally found our missing orb. Quark demanded of Terrell. How'd you get in here? I demand to see your admittance receipt. Terrell stared at the indignant Quark. You don't recognize me? Should I? Terrell turned her attention to Odo. How about you, shape-shifter?
What about me?
Terrell casually lifted her phaser and shot Odo point-blank to stun him. Cisco told Terrell, You had no need to do that. You'd be surprised, Captain. Whenever Odo permits himself to be captured, I can't help but be suspicious. Terrell spoke as if she knew Odo. That meant to Cisco that it was possible that she had been on DS9 during the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. Terrell approached the captain. We've been listening to everything you've discussed in here. You've been so caught up in the search for the real story about the orbs that you've completely neglected the greater truth, emissary. You're familiar with the orbs the Bajorans call the Tears of the Prophets. Those blue orbs come from the celestial temple Jal-Kuri, the wormhole. So where do you think the red orbs come from? Terrell answered herself without even waiting for Cisco to respond. They come from another wormhole. Jadzia's expression was of disbelief. There can't be 2. The entire Bajoran sector's been subjected to one of the most intensive subspace structural analyses the Federation has ever undertaken. There is no second wormhole. The Cardassian sneered at Jadzia. I don't suppose that thorough analysis of yours included the effects of the 3 orbs of Jalbador? Kira cried out, You're lying! There is only one celestial temple, and the prophets are those who dwell within it. Without even glancing at her target, Terrell swept out her arm and smashed her phaser across Kira's face. Spare me the superstitious prattle, Bajoran.
Your prophets are exploitive aliens, and they've treated your world like their own personal chessboard for 20 millennia. Kira launched herself at Terrell, her hands her only weapons. But Atrig, the bald Cardassian, stunned Kira with his phaser. Kira collapsed instantly. Dr. Baton then ordered, "The rest of you get down on your knees, with your hands on your heads."
Knowing his people had to be his first priority, Sisko knelt on the stones beneath the night sky and the brilliance of a full Bajor, and he placed his hands on his head. The others immediately followed the example of their commander. Terrell looked pleased at his compliance. "You and I are alike, you know. You've seen the blue orbs. You've contacted the wormhole aliens. But do you know one of the things that distinguishes a red orb from a blue, other than the color, of course?" Sisko remained silent as before. "Verteron traces, Captain. That's what gives the red orb its color. A subspace particle collision that traps chromic oxide atoms in a solidified energy vortex." The sound of her voice rattling on while Major Kira lay untended not a meter away made Sisko's head ache. How soon would it be before Worf would wonder why the meeting in the holosuite was taking so long? Not actually solidified energy, of course, but one with a relativistic rate of temporal decay 1 billion times slower than the local inertial frame of reference. "Am I boring you, Captain?" "You'll never be able to leave this station, Terrell."
"My people built this station. We know more about it than you ever will. Captain, I studied the red orb right here on this station. That single red orb had Verteron traces different from those of the blue orbs. There was no doubt the red one had been close to an opening wormhole many times. With that red orb connected to the right equipment, I was able to release just enough of the solidified energy trapped within it. What I am saying, Captain Sisko, is that I was the first to create a wormhole precursor field."
Sisko's arms dropped to his side.
"Are you saying you made contact with the prophets?"
Terrell gestured with a phaser.
"Wormhole aliens. Not face to face, but oh, they were in there. Some of us could hear their thoughts, an alien race reaching into our minds, knowing our deepest desires."
The Cardassian looked away from him, up to the holographic image of Bajor in the simulated night sky.
"But even knowing what we were dealing with, there were those on my research team who heard the aliens' voices and obeyed them, stepping through the precursor membrane. Most never came back. We were so close to finally controlling the red orb's energy when the order came to withdraw from Bajor."
Terrell paused for a moment, idly rubbed her thumb against the force selector switch on her phaser.
"Captain, you're an intelligent being. The ability to open an artificial, stable wormhole between any 2 points in the galaxy, perhaps in the universe, would be the ultimate defense against aggression. Cardassian fleets could take off from Cardassia Prime and in minutes be in the atmosphere of any enemy's home world, having completely bypassed all that world's defenses. In a day, the Dominion would cease to exist. In a week, the Alpha and Beta quadrants would begin an era of peace unsurpassed in galactic history." Terrell now crouched down beside him. "You see, I know what drives humans to join Starfleet. I even know what you are, Captain. You're an explorer, a dreamer, someone who needs to propel his species beyond all limits of knowledge. In other words, you are just like me. Like any other Cardassian." Terrell stood up again. "The one thing that held back my work was the fact that I had only one red orb. After all, Bajoran legends say that the doorway to Jalbador shall be opened only when all 3 are brought together. But in 60 years, the entire might of Cardassia could only locate one of those 3, until Quark so helpfully announced that he had a map to sell. So with the chance to find a second red orb, which could possibly provide the means to recover the orb lost on the day of withdrawal, it was time for me to return to my old home, to wrest from the 3 red orbs the secret of creating a translocatable wormhole. And then, finally, to destroy the aliens within it so its full power will be in the hands of the greatest force for galactic peace ever imagined. Computer end program.
With Terrell's order to end the holosuite program, the reconstruction of the Jeradon lunar village began to dissolve. The familiar hardness of the holosuite's smooth deck replaced the rough stones previously beneath Sisko's knees. The lighting brightened. In the green glow from the standby holo projectors, the 3 Cardassians resembled supernatural beings emerging from some alien pit. But all Sisko was conscious of was that at last he knew what Terrell's weakness was. You lost an orb. I prefer to think of it as misplaced. She turned her attention to Jake. The lost Cardassian holosuite leads me to believe that the red orb is nearby. Your son wasn't in a holosuite. He was looking at visions of what he wanted most, created by the wormhole aliens to lure him into their realm. Sisko looked up at Terrell. I know the questions you need answered. Let the others go. And you'll tell me everything I want to know? Yes. Once I know my son and the rest of my people are safe. Terrell motioned Sisko to rise to his feet. Computer. Run Odo Ital 1. At once, the holosuite became a duplicate of the station's security office. She gestured to Atrig and Dr. Batan to move the rest of their prisoners into the simulated holding cells. Only Sisko and the 3 Cardassians stood outside the force field, sealing the cells. Terrell lifted her wrist communicator. This is Terrell. 4 to beam out. Energize. The moon of Dorado was a seething crimson orb of gas, wreathed in violent filaments of blazing blue lightning. 3 years ago, the moon's molten core had been tapped to produce power for Bajor, the world it orbited. And the only cost for that benefit was that what had once been an inhabited Class M moon was now a Class Y demon world on which an unprotected visitor would live for less time than it took to draw a breath. The ship that now took up a non-standard orbit around the hellish moon appeared to be an ordinary Sagittarian cruiser, its gleaming yellow hull making electric contrast with Dorado's red clouds. Inside the cruiser, though, Sisko had a better sense of the vessel's survivability. Though it looked Sagittarian on the outside, it was pure Cardassian within. It was liberally outfitted with hidden weapons and capable of outrunning almost any other ship in the sector. Sisko watched a false color image of the moon's hidden surface scrolled across the main bridge viewer of Terrell's cruiser. You actually plan to beam down there? Terrell nodded. We've found the abandoned village, and from the details on that map, we can narrow down the orb's location to perhaps a square kilometer of surface area, and search. Terrell, how did you manage to misplace an orb on the station and have it turn up on this moon? Terrell stood up from her chair. It's not the same orb, Captain. It's the second. When I find it, then I can return to Terok Nor and find the first. Then, with Vash's orb, I will have all 3 and I will not need equipment to open a wormhole. According to the ancient texts we've deciphered, I merely have to bring the 3 orbs together. Dr. Batan walked slowly onto the bridge. He was wearing a bulky Cardassian environmental suit. In his gloved hands, he carried the red hourglass-shaped crystal which Vash had brought to DS9. Sisko was startled to see that it wasn't as impenetrably dark as it had first appeared to be. Terrell looked at Sisko. See that glow inside? It means it's getting closer to its missing mate. But Captain, you still have to answer my questions. Sisko had known that was coming. All right. You want to know how to negotiate with the wormhole aliens? Terrell nodded. You've dealt with them and returned. My people never did. What's your secret? Sisko went to the environmental suit Dr. Baton pointed out. There is no secret, Terrell. The prophets, the aliens, are in complete control the entire time. They initiate contact. They control the length of contact. And then they terminate contact. Why they, or beings like them, didn't allow your people to return, I can't say. After Terrell snapped Sisko's helmet closed, she sealed it. Keep thinking, Captain. I'm sure you'll come up with something more useful in the next hour.
Why an hour?
Because that's just about how long these suits will stand up to the corrosive atmosphere down there. Terrell, Dr. Baton, and Sisko stepped up on the transporter platform at the side of the bridge. Terrell gave the order to Atrig, who was going to remain on the ship. Energize. Quark lightly moved his finger toward the open area at the front of his holding cell, and marveled at the sudden shock of the simulated security force field. The cell across from Quark's held Bashir, Kira, and Jadzia. Jake and Nog were in the cell to the right. Jadzia called out to Quark. We should try and find a way to shut down this simulation. You must have some kind of override on your holosuites. Can't you try shutting it down? Quark raised his hands to the simulated ceiling.
Don't you people get it? This isn't one of my holo programs. My prisons have chains on the wall, metal rings on the floor, a complete selection of whips and restraints for every taste. And your choice of beverage. I have no idea where this came from.
Quark, could you at least try? The Ferengi huffed with impatience.
Computer, end program. There, are you happy?
Quark, try an override, please.
Computer, this is Quark. I need an emergency shutdown in Holosuite A.
Please state your password. Quark froze. How could he reveal his password to everyone? He cleared his throat.
Computer, this is Quark. And I don't want to hear any snickering. Password. Big lobes.
Big lobes, authenticated. Emergency shutdown procedure is not available. Priority override is in effect during state of emergency. This simulation will run for an additional 2 hours, 33 minutes, or until terminated by Prefect Terrell. Quark shrugged, totally defeated. He looked out past the security office to the doors to the promenade. As gloomy as it was out there in the abnormal blue Cardassian lighting Quark remembered so well and hated so much from the old days on the station, he sighed. If this simulation is so accurate, I wish we could get one of those pedestrians out there to come in. Odo snorted.
If it's an accurate simulation from the occupation, no one will. This wasn't the favorite place on the station for Bajorans or Cardassians.
But someone did enter through the main doors. A human, in a tuxedo 400 years out of style, strolled into the cell area. It was Vic, the holographic mid-20th century lounge singer. Hey gang, looks like you cats could use a cake with a file baked in it.
Vic, I don't know what you're talking about, but you gotta get us out of here.
I know. You're innocent, right? Odo spoke up.
We're more than innocent. We've been put here by the real criminals who are now running loose.
Kira shook her head in disbelief. Vic, how can you be here? Vic shrugged. You got me, dollface. There I am, up on stage at my joint singing my heart out for the blue rinse set. Next thing I know, the lights start flickering and the power goes out. Odo interrupted.
Vic, I'm sure this is all fascinating, but could you go back to the center office and open the little drawer to the left of the chair, right under the display screen?
Is that going to help get the power back on? Odo pleaded with him.
Vic, the drawer!
You got it, Pally. What exactly am I looking for?
An optolithic data rod.
Vic held up his hands. Whoa, slow down, Stretch. I'm strictly a 20th century hologram. Jadzia called from her cell. It's going to look like a fat, transparent green pencil. Vic walked out of the holding cell area and soon returned holding the optolithic crystal in his hand. Odo gave him the instructions.
Put the fat green pencil in the slot by the door frame and slide it in.
At once, the security force fields flickered and the prisoners jumped out of their cells to join Vic. He rubbed his hands together. So, what do you say we all come back to my place? Drinks are on the house. Jadzia looked at Vic. We can't just yet. We still have to shut down this simulation. Kira appeared in the doorway holding a Cardassian phaser. She then aimed the weapon at the far wall. Quark groaned. There goes my insurance. Half of the holding cell area began to waver, and finally winked out. Quark grimaced as 3 clusters of green hollow emitters exploded.
Someone's gonna pay for that.
Then Quark saw Vic. The hologram was wavering, sparking with holographic scan lines, and going transparent. You know, gang, all of a sudden, I'm not feeling so hot. Vic shuffled toward a wall of functional hollow emitters, and Quark was surprised to see a gray metal door materialize with a red sign reading Exit just above it. See ya in the funny papers. Cisco was in hell. It was the only way to describe what the Bajoran moon Gerardo had become. The ground was nothing more than stone and shifting ribbons of storm-driven dirt. He cringed as roiling crimson swirls and eddies of corrosive gas appeared like entrails twisting all around him. Terrell's harsh voice crackled at him through his helmet speakers.
In that building.
Dr. Baton held up the red orb and swung it slowly toward the ancient stone wall to which Terrell pointed. The pale red light within the orb intensified slightly. Cisco trudged ahead. The building, perhaps a farmer's market a millennium ago, was larger than most in the village. The doorway through the wall was still in perfect condition. The ground was littered with stones and tiles from the collapsed roof. The glow of the red orb was much stronger now. Cisco watched as Terrell used a tricorder, aiming it at the ground and showing the results to Dr. Baton. Terrell informed Cisco.
There's a chamber under this floor. Dr. Baton's going to find a way down.
Dr. Baton walked carefully back and forth across the rubble-strewn floor, using the red orb as if it were some primitive dowsing tool. Cisco shouted with some difficulty to Terrell.
You don't need me down here. I will, Captain. Dr. Baton will keep Vash's orb, but I need you to carry the second. You've survived contact with orbs before. The red orb claimed 7 of my researchers. I won't risk touching them. What about Dr. Baton? He handled the first orb years ago on Terok Nor. After that, he became addicted to neurodepressants. By taking them, he can't hear the voices. Have any of you thought that perhaps these orbs aren't shaping up to be the best transportation system? There are ways around the orb's psychic effects. That's why I had my soldiers save Quark from hanging on the day of withdrawal. Ferengi are resistant to most forms of telepathy. Even betazoids can't get past those 4 brain lobes. So I told Atrig to bring me one of the Ferengi from the promenade, and he brought me Quark and Odo. What about Garrick? Very good, Captain. Garrick came on his own. He and I never really got along, but Gul Dukat and he were involved in something. It's not important. But he and Odo and Quark did enter my lab that day.
Cisco touched her arm.
What happened to Quark and Odo and Garrick? 22 minutes before the self-destruct went off, the 3 of them staggered out of my lab. When I looked inside, the red orb was gone. I stunned them, and left the station. I thought everything would be lost when it auto-destructed, but it failed to do so.
Sisko turned and saw Dr. Baton firing a phaser blast into the ground.
He's found a way down, Captain. The orb's not far.
Terrell aimed her shoulder lights into the pit Dr. Baton had created.
Down there.
Sisko moved cautiously to the side of the opening. Dr. Baton had already thrown a rope down to assist Sisko's descent. Sisko took the rope in his clumsy Cardassian gloves and slowly edged himself off the side and into the hole. A few seconds later, he was standing on the floor and looking in the direction in which the second orb was supposed to be found. He saw a pristine wall carved with the largest Bajoran mural he had ever seen.
What's wrong, Captain? Nothing. If the orb's down here, it might be hidden in a wall. I'll check it out.
Then he walked slowly over to the mural to see if he could find any place that an orb might be. There, in the mural, the distinctive Bajoran spiral that signified the opening of the Celestial Temple. Though this spiral curved the opposite way from most others Sisko had seen. He moved closer to the stone block in which the spiral was carved. It didn't fit tightly to the other stones in the wall. He pressed his body against it. The stone block swung up, little more than a slender slab of rock. And behind it, in a hollow chamber no larger than an orb arc, a second red orb glowed brightly, throwing off small flares of red light. Sisko reported to Terrell.
I found it!
Her only answer was,
We have 19 minutes.
Carefully, Sisko removed the orb from its protective shelter. Terrell told him to tie the rope to his belt so they could pull both him and the orb up. By the time he had emerged from the hole in the floor, both orbs were blazing brightly enough that they couldn't be looked at directly. Terrell called out for Atrid, who was still on the cruiser.
Lock onto our beacons and energize.
In that split second, Sisko suddenly knew that Terrell couldn't be allowed to control the red orbs. He swung the orb he had retrieved directly at Dr. Baton's helmet. As the Cardassian doctor stumbled backward, horrified, dropping Vash's orb to press his gloves to the rapidly growing network of cracks that spread across his corroded helmet, Sisko yanked his own transporter beacon off and threw it away. Terrell was still fumbling for her phaser as she began to dissolve in the transporter beam. Dr. Baton's helmet suddenly exploded like fine crystal an instant before he was beamed away as well. Sisko didn't stop to ask himself what he thought he had done. Instead, with only 15 minutes of life remaining, he concentrated only on what he still had to do. He tucked Vash's orb under one arm, secured the second orb under his other arm, then began to run. He knew he had only 15 minutes in which to hide the red orbs so they could never be found again. Not by Terrell, not by anyone. Finally, he located a wall and made out the shape of a relatively flat paving stone on which he could place the orbs. All that he needed now was some way to dislodge the wall, get it started falling in the right direction. He decided to check out the far side. He couldn't afford to waste the time it would take to make his way around it, so he risked tearing his suit as he half clambered over a pile of rubble at its side and wedged his boot. Sisko groaned. He was trapped 2 meters above ground level, visible from any direction, with no place to hide the orbs. Sisko trembled with frustration as he tugged at his boot. He picked up another rock and bashed the offending boot with it, but all he managed to do was wedge it in deeper. Warning, loss of atmospheric integrity in 3 minutes. There was nothing for him to do but lift up a rock and smash it against the red orbs of Bajor. Again and again he brought the rock down, but the simple matter of normal space-time was no match for the solidified energy vortices of a non-linear realm. The orbs withstood his attack, untouched. 30 seconds. Then he lifted the red orb as high as he could possibly stretch, and his arms were locked in position. Something was holding them. He twisted around in the bulky Cardassian suit to see a white shape glowing in the brilliance of his shoulder lights. The luminous being moved closer to him, put its arm around Sisko's shoulders, tapped itself once, then all was still. In the light of a transporter beam, Sisko could finally see through his helmet and the helmet of the angel who had come to save him. Everything would be all right now. It was Jake. Sisko stood on the promenade with Kira, outside the entrance to the Bajoran temple. In each hand he carried a simple cloth bag, and in each bag was a red orb of Jalbador. Less than 26 hours after his dramatic rescue on Gerardo, Deep Space Nine was nearly back to normal. Of Tyrell's fate, no one knew. There was no record of a Sagittarian cruiser breaking orbit of Gerardo. A gravity disturbance might have pulled it into a deadly descent. Sisko had told Quark and Odo what Tyrell had told him about what had happened to them on the day of withdrawal. Odo flatly refused to believe her account. But Quark had started talking to Jake about collaborating on a novel based on the incident. The Defiant was safely in dock again, after fielding the massive search party that had led to Sisko's discovery. Sisko turned to Kira. It's time to end it. Captain, we still don't know who killed Dal Nortran. Sisko agreed and lifted the bags. Or who hid the orb on Gerardo. But with these in safe hands, we'll have time to sort it all out at our leisure. Sisko entered the temple. Kai Wynn was there to greet him. Welcome, emissary. And these are the artifacts? Sisko carefully pulled the orbs from their wrappings and placed them on a small table. The steady glow they had developed on Gerardo had now become a gentle pulsing, slowly dimming, slowly brightening, 3 times each minute. The Kai smiled. Oh my, they are clever, aren't they? I could see how many people might think they are somehow related to the orbs of the prophets. I beg your pardon? These are the red orbs of Jalbador. The Kai smiled again. Oh, emissary, I know you are new to our ancient traditions. These red orbs of Jalbador, they are but a legend from a troubled time in our past. Kira was outraged. Kai Wynn, you knew why we asked you up here. These are the orbs. Look at the way they're glowing. Child, I am sure that as much as you and the emissary might want to believe in the tales of Jalbador, a few days of study would reveal the secret of these objects to be nothing more than some novel chemical reaction. Sisko took a breath to calm himself. Kai Wynn, I am asking for your help. The Kai's false smile became exceptionally brittle. Emissary, to express your belief in the legends of Jalbador and in these so-called orbs, well, that is not an example right-thinking Bajoran people would want their children to follow. Kira interrupted angrily. I would think that the best role model for Bajoran children would be one who encouraged the search for truth. The Kai blessed Kira with another blindingly insincere smile. Why, yes, my child, that is what you'd think. But if you are so certain these are the legendary orbs, prove it. Find the third. Sisko sighed. Kai, it took 60 years to find these 2. I have better things to do. But it cannot be difficult, emissary. Look how they're pulsating with the fabled light of Jalbador. You mean you claim these are the red orbs without knowing the whole legend? Enlighten me, Kai. The Kai clapped her hands together in delight, almost laughing at him. 2 orbs glow when coming close to each other. But 3 orbs pulse. I would say that from the behavior of these orbs, the third one is quite nearby. Sisko looked at Kira. The one Tyrell lost. Sisko looked back at Kai Wynn. So if we find the third orb, you will take them back to Bajor for study? The Kai's ingratiating smile returned in full force. Oh, that will hardly be necessary, because you will be able to prove they are real right away. You see, when the 3 red orbs are brought together, the doors to Jalbador open freely, and then, well, it is all in the legends, emissary. The world comes to an end. Kira gave Sisko a conspiratorial wink. What do you say? Shall we go on a wild orb hunt? You're not worried about the end of the world, Major? Kira looked directly at the Kai. Somehow, I don't think the prophets would spend 20,000 years trying to teach us about the universe and our place in it, and at the same time leave a big off switch lying around. Sisko picked up a red orb in each hand. Kai Wynn, we'll be back. Of course you will, emissary, because there are no such things as the red orbs of Jalbador. A few moments later, Sisko was standing on the deck of the promenade, slowly moving the orbs back and forth. Kira pointed toward Quark's bar. The pulsing seemed to speed up a bit. Why, Major, I think you're enjoying this. What I'm going to really enjoy, Captain, is helping the Kai carry 3 of these things onto her shuttle. Sisko laughed as he walked up the center of the promenade, swinging the orbs to the left and to the right. Kira looked at Sisko. Do you think Quark really did steal the 3rd one? Only one way to find out. Sisko carried the red orbs of Jalbador into Quark's, where they proceeded to pulse faster than Sisko's suddenly racing heart. He walked straight up to the bar counter and put both red orbs side by side on it. Quark threw his dish towel down on the bar in disgust. Captain, please, those things are more trouble than they could ever be worth. Quark, we have reason to believe the 3rd missing orb is in your bar, and we want to take a look. Sisko picked up the flashing orbs. May I? Oh, go ahead. And I hope if you find it, a prophet jumps out and bites you. Then Quark did the only thing he could do in the circumstances. He put an elbow on the bar, rested his head in his hand, and watched his customers leave in droves. Instead, the bar was packed with Starfleet types, dull, boring, root beer swilling slugs, and they were all on duty, too. Then, just to make matters worse, his idiot brother Rom chose this moment to walk in. Sisko came back to Quark. He pointed to the glass mural on the wall facing the bar counter. How long has that been there? You mean the, Admiral? Gul Dukat put it up. Sisko studied the portrait with a frown. So it was here, on the day of withdrawal. Quark closed the till, locked the order pads, then left the bar to join the Starfleet types at the base of the mural. The orbs were now on the deck in front of it, flashing madly. Chief O'Brien and Rom were kneeling to either side, waving tricorders around like they knew what they were doing. Jadzia stood behind them, looking exceptionally lovely, as always, Quark thought. Is there a problem, Captain? I don't know. According to the way these orbs are reacting, the 3rd orb is behind that mural. O'Brien got to his feet and joined Sisko and Quark. If I didn't know better, I'd say there was a miniature sensor mask in there, just like the one Sater and Lean used in the water plant. That was too much for Quark. Why would anyone put a Shenshore mask inside a mural of a Tholian? He couldn't finish the statement. All he could think of was how much he hated the mural, how he had sworn he would tear it down the moment Gul Dukat left the station, and how, 6 years later, he still hadn't brought himself to do anything about it. Quark recognized the near ultrasonic Ferengi scream that pierced the bar, and shoved aside Sisko and O'Brien to peer around the back of the mural to see Rom, on his knees, staring into a small open access panel at the back of the mural, his face bathed in a rapidly flashing red light. I found it! I found the 3rd orb! Suddenly, Odo was behind Quark, arms folded, ready to make an arrest.
Anything you'd like to tell me, Quark?
Odo, I didn't know it was there. I swear I didn't know. Then Sisko was at Quark's side. That's all right, Constable. I don't think he did know the orb was there. Odo snorted, disbelieving.
How could he not?
Sisko explained. For the same reason you and Garrick don't remember what happened to you on the day of withdrawal. Your memories were tampered with, and all I know is that it has something to do with Tyrell and these orbs. Quark stood closer to his new best friend, the great Captain Sisko. Sisko looked at Kira. Should I put the 3 orbs together? Kira shrugged. Maybe that's not a good idea? You think they might actually cause the end of the world? Quark exploded.
What?
Sisko chided him. Calm down, Quark. It's part of the legend of Jalbador that when the 3 orbs are brought together, the temple doors open and the world ends.
I don't want the world to end in my bar. Talk about being bad for business.
O'Brien's attention was fixed on his tricorder. I'm picking up a lot of neutrino flux. Probably not a good idea to get them too close together. Sisko held up a hand that silenced Quark. You call it, Chief. O'Brien made an adjustment to his tricorder. 4 meters should be safe. Sisko smiled at Kira. Major, why don't you go back to the temple and invite Kai Wynn to visit Quark's? Kira grinned fiercely. With pleasure. Quark watched anxiously as Sisko lifted the newly discovered red orb and carried it to the bar. Soon all 3 were on the bar, 1 at each end and 1 dead center, all of them flashing so rapidly that they almost appeared to glow with steady lights. Quark turned to the red orb directly in front of him. There definitely was something inside the orb. He knew because there had been the last time. The city in the swamp, the glowing light approaching through the trees. Quark popped open his eyes in Ferengi alarm.
You're not Moogie.
He struck at the hideous monster before him, only at the last moment dimly realizing it was a reflection within the sparkling red facets of the orb. Quark, no! It could have been Captain Sisko who shouted. It could have been anyone. But by then it was too late, and Quark held the orb in his hand and felt himself swung around through the air. When he let go and fell to the deck, he looked up and saw that the 3 orbs were floating in mid-air, just a meter or so above the deck, spinning and glowing, each like an orb of the prophets, except their lights were blood red. Twisting tendrils of light snaked out from each orb to link up with the others, defining a triangle's edges, creating a glow, a darkness, a distortion of some strange type. Quark saw O'Brien try to touch one of the orbs and be flung back in a flash of red lightning. He saw Jadzia standing close to the floating orbs, aiming a tricorder at them, a sudden strong breeze tugging at her hair. Quark braced himself against the deck. Somehow it felt as if the deck was sinking in the center of his bar, drawing everything toward it. The breeze was getting stronger. Now the flow of air blew into the bar, swirling napkins and debris into the center of the orb's pattern. Jadzia called out over the intensifying wind. We've got intensive neutrino flux, a definite wormhole precursor. And then Kai Wynn and Major Kira were at the doorway of the bar. The Kai's saffron robes billowed around her. Emissary, what have you done? Quark could see Sisko tapping his communicator, giving orders, looking wild. His brother Rom pulled on his arm, dragging him around the bar, giving the floating orbs the widest possible berth. Then the lights went out, as if the entire power grid had blown. Sisko suddenly shouted, Abandon station! Chief, Jadzia, pass the order on to abandon station! Suddenly new sources of light appeared on the promenade. Golden columns of quantum mist, energy beamouts. Quark felt Rom's fingernails dig into his arms. The whole station seemed to creak and flex. The glow from the bar became brighter. O'Brien shouted, Rom, you're with me! Quark saw O'Brien lunge for Rom and grab his brother's arm just as Rom held onto Quark's. Quark shouted, Chief, what's happening? There's a wormhole opening in the station. Quark felt his heart stop. A wormhole was opening in the station? A wormhole was opening in his bar? Quark looked into his bar and saw the ridiculous mural sucked down into the center of the triangle formed by the floating, glowing orbs. As far as he was concerned, the legends of the red orbs of Bajor were true. His world had come to an end. Sisko jumped down from the Defiant's transporter pad and ran into the corridor and to the bridge. He could already hear the ship's impulse engines coming online as she prepared to undock from the station. Worf was in the command chair and he stepped out as soon as Sisko appeared.
Sir, more than 1,000 people are already evacuated.
On the main viewer, Deep Space Nine stretched out to the stars, but it was only a dark silhouette against the notorious belt. All station lights were out. Sisko knew just how fortunate the inhabitants and crew of the station were. With the Garno and the Bondar dispatched to help with the evacuation, more than 12 banks of transporters were operating at once. Jadzia and O'Brien were next on the bridge, followed by Bashir and Kira. A large glowing sphere of red energy blossomed over a section of the promenade, just below Ops. Sisko turned to Jadzia. What is that? The wormhole precursor. It's continuing to accelerate.
Worf,
What's the status of the evacuation?
1,500 people away, but there is growing gravimetric distortion.
Worf fell silent as a chorus of gasps filled the bridge. The section of the habitat ring closest to the glowing red sphere of energy was beginning to buckle, bending like a broken wheel. Sisko stared at the screen in sickened fascination. Release the docking clamps. On the viewer, 3 escape modules launched from the habitat ring, but instead of flying free of the station, they were drawn on perfect arcs into the red sphere. An icy hand seemed to clutch Sisko's heart. Jake! Did anyone see Jake? Bashir answered at once. He's on board. A section of the habitat ring broke off and fell up into the red sphere. Jadzia made her report. It's a wormhole, Benjamin. For some reason, it's opening about 100 times more slowly than the one we're used to. But it is opening. Major Kira, get us out of here. On the viewer, the image of Deep Space Nine, what was left of it, angled abruptly as the Defiant banked away. The starship shook violently as the viewer flared with blue energy. Worf shouted,
We are under attack.
Sisko responded, Full power to shields. Liege Terrell appeared on the viewer.
You're not going anywhere. Get back to your station, Captain. You found the third orb. Now you must join it. If Cardassia can't have them, then no one can. Fire.
Captain, her ship is cloaked.
Major Kira, we need to be stabilized so Worf can return fire. Kira called back. Our thrusters are offline. Impulse is out. All we've got is warp, and that's not powered up yet. Sisko turned to Jadzia. Can we get support from another ship? All channels are down, Benjamin. The other Starfleet ships are withdrawing. How can that be, Dax? Surely they can see we're in difficulty. Jadzia turned from her science station to Sisko. We're so close to that wormhole, we could be within some kind of event horizon. Those other ships might not even know we're still here. O'Brien reported, 30 seconds to warp. On the viewer, the red wormhole now obscured more than half of DS9. Sisko watched as the station's upper docking pylons began to twist down to the red distortion, hull plates popping loose like autumn leaves in a storm. Then one of the pylons broke free entirely as an explosion engulfed its base. It tumbled into the wormhole, visibly breaking up into still smaller pieces. Then, as if it were no more than a crumpled piece of tissue being pulled down a drain, Deep Space Nine fell in on itself, shattering like brittle ice, each shard drawn spinning into the endless, infinite tunnel of the red wormhole at its heart. Sisko felt a part of himself vanishing into that ravenous maw, to be lost forever, along with his station. O'Brien announced, We have warp. On screen, the red wormhole continued to expand, continued to open, its unwinding coils of negative energy now reaching out for the Defiant. Sisko fell back in his chair, gripped the arms. Now, Major. Terrell's voice echoed from all the bridge speakers at once.
Never!
And then a final blast of phaser fire hit the starship as she went to warp. And the first tendrils of the wormhole brushed across her hull to claim her. No one on board the Defiant had a chance. They were all engulfed in a red flash of overwhelming intensity, the sheer magnitude of which exceeded anything in their entire experience of existence. And then each moment dissolved into the next, until there was only the silence and the darkness of endless, infinite space. In the wormhole, in the hands of the prophets. Captain Jean-Luc Picard walks with the Cisco by the cool waters of Bajor.
This does not happen.
The Cisco says, "It does not, but it did. Look around and see it for yourself." They stand together on the promenade, the Cisco and O'Brien, and the Cisco and 12-year-old Jake with his bare feet in his fishing pole, and with Kai Wynn, and with Vic, and they watch the promenade die exactly as it dies the first time. Deck plates buckling, power currents sparking, debris and trailing strips of dislodged carpet spiraling into the singularity that is Quark's bar. Where the red wormhole opens the doors to the second temple. Admiral Ross sits across from the Cisco in the wardroom of Deep Space Nine. Behind him, the casualty lists scroll endlessly as the war with the Dominion begins. Ends. Begins again. There is no second temple. The Cisco stands at the center of Bahala, in the shade of the Bantaka Tower. But there was. Kira protests, "There is no was." The Cisco replies, "Then explain this." He is with them on the bridge of the Defiant, as Deep Space Nine is consumed by the red wormhole, and the ship is trapped in a net of energies that pull it from that time to another yet to be. In his restaurant in New Orleans, the Cisco's father says, "That time is meaningless." On the sands of Tyree, the Cisco's true mother says, "And another time yet to be is more meaningless still." The Cisco's laughter echoes in the serene confines of the Bajoran temple on the promenade. "I am here to teach you, am I not? Then pay attention." The prophets take their places in the outfield as the Cisco steps up to the plate. The Cisco is delighted. He tosses his baseball into the air. It hangs like a planet in space, wheeling about Bajor Bahala until there appears a baseball bat like a comet sparkling through the stars to... The Cisco is in the white space. Jennifer stands before him, her legs crushed by the debris on the dying Saratoga, her uniform sodden with her blood. "You keep bringing us back to the baseball game." The Cisco takes her hand in his. "Yes, because now it is you, all of you, who will not go forward." Jennifer is in the dress she wore on the day they were wed. "There is no forward. If there is no forward, then why are we not already there? Why do you not know everything that I tell you?" General Martok reminds him, "You are linear." The Cisco says, "So are you." And for the very first time, the Cisco now forces them from the white space to a place he makes real, where from the mists of the moon of AR-558, Jem'Hadar soldiers advance and Houdini mines explode all around them.
What is this?
This is death. This is change. This is the forward progression of time to an end in which there is no more forward. This is the fate of all beings, even your fate. Tayopaka looks up from the reflecting pool. Impossible. And now it is he who returns them to the white space. And you are all part of that continuum, from past to future, with an end before you, as surely as you had a beginning. Commander Arla asks in despair, "What is this?" "It is why I am here." Nog agrees. "You are the emissary." The Cisco shakes his head. I am not the emissary. I am your emissary. The Cisco brings them all back to the baseball game. The Cisco throws a ball high in the air, swings, hits one out of the park, and all the prophets turn to watch the orb vanish in the brilliant blue sky. Do you see how things have changed? The way you were then, the way you are now. The prophets are silent. The Cisco tosses another baseball into the air. You want to find out what happens next because, for now, you just don't know. We know everything. Then answer me this. To whom do the prophets pray? But the prophets do not answer.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Millennium, The Fall of Terok Nor, was written by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. It was read by Joe Morton. It was abridged for audio by George Truitt. The recording engineer was Fran Pierce. Editing by Dan Mackesy. Sound design and post-production by Frog Pond Productions. Original music was composed by Carl Schurtz, Dave Kersner, Eve Beglarian, Carl Sharif, Richard Heyman, Sam McCallie, and Richard Emmett. The associate producer was Will Carlino. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Millennium, The Fall of Terok Nor was produced and directed by Rick Bradley. This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio.